She was a single mother expecting her third child.
She was real happy. She was already making plans.
She was able to acquire the new home.
And this time, she knew she'd found the right partner.
He cared for her son.
He was an upstanding pillar of the community.
Any problems or needs, he's the guy.
But then 3 gunshots leave her clinging to life.
She was very gravely injured.
There was hope that she could push through.
Can you hear me?
It has all the markings of a hate crime.
The letters KKK was spray painted in multiple places.
This is certainly a targeted attack.
Until detectives uncover a shocking motive for murder.
It didn't make sense.
Something so violent doesn't sit right.
Whoever did this was trying to create confusion.
October 13th, 2020. It's just after midnight in Chicago, Illinois, a Midwest metropolis of nearly 10 million.
The city certainly is rich in history, from its architecture to its location. It has the lake, it has skyscrapers.
Even though Chicago is a world-class city, you can very clearly at times see the racial and economical divide of the city.
The reality is there is a lot of crime that happens here in Chicago.
In response, the city has turned to what's known as ShotSpotter.
ShotSpotter technology is an acoustic, sound-driven device that alerts police before a 911 call can even be placed.
Once shots are reported, Chicago police act based on the information that they receive.
It's always listening, always ready the moment trouble arises. And at 12:06 a.m., the ShotSpotter system alerts dispatch of several gunshots in the Jeffrey Manor neighborhood.
Jeffrey Manor is a community on the south side of Chicago, off of 95th Street. It's a quiet community.
There's relatively not a lot of crime.
1064, officer response needed to the area of 95th Street. ShotSpotter alert.
10-4, badge 2366 en route.
First responders immediately rush to the scene.
When they arrived, there was a female laying face down outside of a residence.
She had been shot and was fighting for her life.
We still got a pulse.
And it's not just her life on the line.
This woman is maybe 8 months pregnant.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
But as long as she is breathing, there's hope that she and her unborn baby can survive.
Need medical, multiple gunshot wounds.
Number one duty of the police officer is to render aid.
Stay with me now. Can you tell me your name?
She is still conscious enough to give the police her name.
Stacy.
35-year-old Stacy Jones was a single mother of 2 boys when she first moved to Chicago from Tennessee.
She wanted a better life for her children.
She had goals, and she just wanted the best for everybody.
She found a home in the Jeffrey Manor community, which was a big positive for her. She had gotten exactly what she needed in order to raise her small family.
Chicago also came with a built-in support network.
Her mother's family was from Chicago.
They all helped out because they were so close.
Hey, cut over here? Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Transitioning from Tennessee to a big city like Chicago, community and relationships are going to be important.
The big move also came with more financial stability.
Stacy Jones was a probation officer.
She had been part of the law enforcement family for many, many years.
Prior to her move, she accepted a position with Cook County.
Probation officer paid a little bit more here than in Tennessee. That's why she went to Chicago.
Once settled, Stacy made sure her sons thrived in the Windy City.
She was a good mother to both of them. She put out 100%. And when they got older, she had them in football, baseball, and karate, so she kept them busy.
Hey, Mom, how's it going?
And through her son's time on the football team, Stacy found some excitement of her own.
Your son, he's a natural. Does he practice at home with Dad?
Nah, he ain't around.
Her son's coach was 39-year-old Corey Deering, a pillar of the community.
He was well known in the neighborhood for his longtime volunteer work with kids, as well as his career with the Parks Department.
He helped her son develop his skills in football, and he seemed to have enjoyed playing the sport.
And with each practice, Stacy found herself more and more drawn to him.
There's a level of trust that she developed with Deering because he cared for her son.
But I see how good you are with these kids, though.
Yeah, these kids, they bring me joy.
This was someone that she began to like.
For Corey, the attraction was mutual.
At some point, their relationship became close, and they began a romantic relationship.
They quickly fell in love.
Within months of meeting, Stacy got a happy surprise when she found out she was expecting a new baby.
And when she learned it was going to be another boy, she was even more excited.
Over the next several months, Stacy wasted no time getting prepared for her new arrival.
She was real happy. She was already making plans. She was ready for it.
But now, just a month before her baby is due, police have discovered Stacy lying outside of her home after the Chicago ShotSpotter system detected gunshots in the area.
She was very gravely injured. She sustained 3 gunshot wounds to the back.
Can you hear me?
But she was still breathing.
There was hope that she could push through this.
But it's also what's around Stacy's body that officers find particularly alarming.
There's fresh graffiti at the scene.
The letters KKK was spray painted in multiple places on the home.
Five-year-old Stacy Jones was excited to welcome a new baby into her growing family with Coach Corey Deering.
She had found out that it was a boy, so it wasn't like she didn't have experience raising these little boys.
She was happy. She made me proud. And was going to be a good mother of 3.
But now, just a month from her due date, Chicago police have found Stacy shot multiple times outside her home and racial slurs spray painted on the outside of her house.
When you have something so violent happen to a woman 8 months pregnant, it just doesn't sit right.
But she was alive.
You still got a pulse.
While paramedics begin to work on Stacy, responding officers clear the house.
They make a terrible discovery inside.
Her 11 and 7-year-old sons were in the house when their mother's gunned down on the porch.
Thankfully, they were unharmed, and both were asleep during the incident.
To be one moment sleeping soundly in your bed, to be awakened by sirens, I can't even imagine what those children were going through.
The officers contact one of Stacy's cousins to come pick up the children, while paramedics transport Stacy to the hospital.
As they're preparing for the ambulance, though, something falls from her pajamas.
It was a 9mm pistol.
We have a woman with a weapon in her waistband.
This certainly raised suspicion that Stacy Jones expected that something was going to happen.
Could that also mean she knew the attacker?
As EMTs rush Stacy to the hospital, major crimes detectives arrive and begin examining the scene.
What do we have, officer?
Stacy had been found shot in the back and was lying on her side, so it's apparent she turned away from her attacker.
So it would indicate to me one of 2 things. One, that she was either retreating in an urgent manner just to get away, or that she had completely let her guard down.
Detectives discover 3 shell casings by the door. as well as a small pool of blood.
Which means this is likely where the shooting occurred.
There's also derogatory graffiti plastered around the scene.
There's a racial slur.
Police immediately began their investigation, wondering whether or not a hate crime was involved.
But given the nature of the neighborhood, detectives are skeptical.
The neighborhood is predominantly African American and Hispanic.
It's a tight-knit community, so most of the people that stay in Jeffrey Manor know the ins and outs of Jeffrey Manor.
It's known as the Jeffrey Manor Maze. It'd be very difficult to do like a drive-by shooting per se.
This is not typically an area where white supremacists or racists would ply their trade, as it were.
Those sorts of racial tensions usually occur in areas where minorities are new arrivals rather than established residents.
It didn't make sense.
So it's clear that whoever did this was trying to initially throw the police off or kind of create confusion into the scene.
Still, the fact that Stacy took the time to get her own gun seems to indicate she was expecting trouble.
This is certainly a targeted attack.
But even though she had a weapon, Stacy had been shot in the back.
That suggests, obviously, somebody would have been retreating from a threat.
Was it immediately confrontational, or was it a conversation? Did her guard get let down?
When the detectives run Stacy's name, they realize that she may have had an extra reason to be wary of late-night visitors.
They find out that she's a probation officer.
Naturally, you want to think, does someone have angst against her directly based on her profession?
She's part of the law enforcement family, and everybody that puts on that badge understands that keep an eye out for yourself.
Maybe the shooter was a convicted felon out on probation, or the relative of an inmate whose probation had been revoked.
Hoping someone might have witnessed something, detectives canvass Stacy's neighbors.
Most homes these days use some sort of Ring camera or a camera that records the outside of what's going on.
We'd like to ask you some questions about the shooting that happened across the street.
Honestly, I ain't hear nothing. I was asleep.
Well, I noticed you do have a security camera.
Do you mind sharing that footage with us?
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Here's our card. Go ahead and send it to us on that email address right there. All right, thank you, sir.
When Stacy's cousin arrives to pick up the boys, she also agrees to speak with detectives.
That's the first line of inquiry. Who would want to harm this person? That they would have the nerve to come to her residence and gun her down.
Are you aware if Stacy had any enemies?
No. She was very well loved by everybody.
Her cousin doesn't know of anybody who would want to harm Stacy.
What about the father of her baby?
Obviously, people were aware she was 8 months pregnant.
To be honest, she never told me the name of her baby's father.
She was very private for, as it turns out, maybe some obvious reasons.
But I do know that he was married, though.
Stacy Jones's cousin has just told detectives investigating the shooting that left the young mother of two fighting for her life that she believes Stacy was dating a married man.
Could that have something to do with the shooting?
She was potentially breaking up a family, right?
I wish I knew more. Sorry.
Thanks. We're gonna head to the hospital.
We'll let you know if we have more questions, okay?
Unfortunately, Stacy won't be able to provide the detectives with any more information either.
When the detectives arrived at the hospital, they were greeted with bittersweet news.
The good part about it was they were able to deliver the baby alive.
He was delivered in critical condition.
My grandson, they're transferring him now. But it's bad.
There, he could receive proper neonatal care in the hopes that he could survive.
However, the doctors are unable to save his mother's life.
Stacy. Baby. They said there was nothing they could do.
Unfortunately, the injury was just too severe. She didn't survive.
Stacy's family is devastated by the outcome.
When I found out, I started crying. It was hard.
You lose a loved one, someone that is that person that you lean on and depend on, then all of a sudden it abruptly ends. It's unfair, it's not right.
After giving Stacy's mother a moment to compose herself, detectives ask if she'd be willing to answer a few more questions.
We want to know about the domestic relationships.
The sooner interviews take place, the more critical the responses.
Detectives start by asking if she can think of anyone who might have wanted to hurt Stacy.
No one. It doesn't make any sense.
She was a loving person. Not just me and the mother and children, to everybody.
To think somebody would be able to do this to a very visibly third trimester, not just woman, but a human being, was almost unimaginable.
Her mother is also unaware of any issues at Stacy's work.
No, she works so hard for those people.
She was dedicated to where she worked. She had a criminal justice degree. She had a master's degree, forensic, and she was going on to get a doctorate in forensic science.
Her hard work made her well-loved by co-workers as well as clients.
Stacy chose a career where she's a probationary officer, and most people would think that that's a dangerous job, and it can be at times, but oftentimes probation officers will begin to, in some ways, develop a relationship, trying to make sure that they see the best for that individual so that they don't have to see them again.
Detectives then move on to the topic of the father of Stacy's baby.
Obviously, people were aware she's pregnant, but she was very private about who the father was.
In fact, the family didn't even know his name.
After wrapping up with Stacy's mother, detectives head back to the station, where they learn the footage from Stacy's neighbor has come in.
It was grainy at first, but it really created a clear-cut picture about what happened that night.
The video reveals a silver SUV approaching Stacy's house and then driving slowly past.
More importantly, they were able to get the license plate.
A moment later, a man enters the frame.
Although they could not see the face of the individual, one of the things that they saw was a sweatshirt with a very distinctive symbol on it.
He seemed suspicious as he approaches Stacy's house, shining a flashlight into the windows.
After the man knocks on the door, detectives watch as Stacy peers out one of the windows.
She obviously recognizes him and opens her door.
The two of them have a brief conversation outside.
Then she turned her back to go back into the home when she was shot.
He took the time to spray KKK at the scene.
At that point, the man runs.
But it's clear that Stacy never reaches for her own weapon.
There's no evidence to show that she felt so uncomfortable that she wanted to retrieve it. Matter of fact, she was so comfortable that she turned her back on the attacker because she didn't feel like her life was in danger.
But it's still not clear if the man was the father of her baby or just an angry parolee. It could have been anyone.
Hoping to learn more, detectives head to the probation office where Stacy worked.
They're greeted by one of Stacy's co-workers. And she says she's willing to talk to them.
Do you have a few minutes to speak to us about Stacy?
Oh, of course. Anything I can do to help.
Detectives start by asking her coworker if she knows of any parolees that Stacy might have had issues with.
They'd asked if maybe it was someone that she'd sent back to jail, or maybe a family member of someone.
Oh, not Stacy. I mean, Stacy got along with everyone. And I'm pretty sure that if there was an issue or a problem, she would let me know.
That's when the police learned that the coworker was also one of Stacy's closest friends.
Do you know anything about the father of her child? Anything you can tell us?
Actually, yes.
She was able to shed even more light on the person that she was pregnant with.
And I do know that his first name was Corey.
She knew his name was Corey. She wasn't aware of his last name.
He was Stacy's son's football coach.
But she also knew that the situation with Corey wasn't as rosy as one might think.
Stacy had recently hinted that they were having trouble.
She told law enforcement that he was unhappy with the pregnancy.
As a matter of fact, he told her to get an abortion.
Detectives investigating the murder of Stacy Jones have just learned that the father of her child was less than thrilled about her pregnancy.
There's that opportunity of him being found out by his wife in particular. That certainly is, unfortunately, motives that we've seen in the past.
Detectives ask Stacy's coworker about Stacy and Corey's dating history.
She said that Stacy and Coach Corey had started to date at the beginning of the year, and she was pregnant within a few months.
She said that Corey said that he was afraid of how the baby was going to affect his marriage.
He was pressuring her to have an abortion.
But Stacy refused, and eventually she and Corey broke things off.
The coworker said that Stacy thought that would be the end of it.
She's already a single mother. She's raising 2 boys, and she's got a job. Even if the father wasn't going to be involved, she appeared to be very confident that her baby was going to be just fine.
And then it got really ugly. He began to threaten her.
The further that Stacy got along in her pregnancy, the more upset he got and the more threats Stacy began to receive.
And there was one threat that stood out in particular.
Corey told Stacy that she would never make it to the end of the pregnancy.
It was obvious that she was afraid, even though she tried to hide it.
As time went on, she appeared to let her guard down, almost as if to say, well, I'm nearing the end, so maybe the threat has been alleviated.
She says Stacy had become confident enough to go on the offensive herself.
She started an investigation into Corey and into his background in the efforts to be able to collect child support.
She wanted him to take some financial responsibility.
Now, was Corey aware that she was going to file child support?
I'm not sure.
This was turning out to not only be a threat to his marriage, but his finances as well, which could be a huge motivating factor.
But was that enough to push him to murder? Back at the station, detectives look into Corey, starting with his last name.
That's presumably not going to be that hard to find the coach of the youth football team.
And sure enough, they quickly get a hit. 39-year-old Corey Deering.
Not only is he a football coach, he actually works for the park district. There's an office there at the local park. He is the person that's called on by people who frequent the park. Any problems or needs that they have, he's the guy.
Corey had been in the district for more than a decade.
He was a trusted and respected member of the community.
He had no criminal background.
But just because Corey doesn't have a rap sheet doesn't mean he hasn't dealt with legal trouble.
As the police began to do a deeper dive, they find out that Corey has other court cases pending against him. And for not 1, not 2, but 5 other custody and child support cases from 5 different women.
Stacy's not the only woman that's out here that is in this relationship with this married man. What's going on with this brother?
It's clear that Corey is no stranger to the situation he was in with Stacy.
So this caused the police to think that if he's had 5 other custody cases and paternity cases pending, why Stacy? Why now?
It's something police want to ask Corey himself.
They went over to the Park District building in order to speak to Corey.
We'd like to ask you some questions about Stacy Jones.
Right at the start of the conversation, Corey confirms he's known Stacy since the previous summer and that her son plays on his youth football team.
When they pressed him on the depths of his relationship with Stacy, he was very upfront.
He openly admitted that him and Stacy had been in a relationship and that the relationship had started fairly quickly after she had moved to Chicago.
Beyond that, Mr. Deering also told police that he knew she was pregnant.
Yeah, I'm also pretty sure I'm the father.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's not ideal, right?
He said that he respected the fact that Stacy decided to keep the baby.
He had no plans to be involved in the child's life, but he had no issue with Stacy Jones.
I mean, this isn't the first time I've been in a situation like this, you know?
Corey tells detectives that he and Stacy did break things off, but remained cordial.
But he also told police he hadn't spoken to Stacy since July.
At that point, detectives reveal that Stacy is dead and her newborn son is in critical condition.
But he was just taken aback that he would at all be a suspect because, as he told the police, he had not talked to her in months.
So detectives ask Corey where he was the night of the shooting.
He says he was home with his wife and his son, just doing some stuff in the garage.
His hobby was fitness, and he worked out a lot.
I was in the garage working out, and my son was there for a while. He eventually went inside.
He said his family could confirm his alibi.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Detectives are still suspicious of Corey, but since they don't have anything to bring him in on, they're forced to leave.
But they promise they'll be in touch.
After talking to Corey, the detectives subpoena his phone records.
They also learned that the trace on the SUV's license plate had come back.
And much to their surprise, the license plate does not actually come back to Corey Deering.
The owner of the car was a person by the name of Alicia Wyatt.
Chicago detectives have just learned that the SUV caught on security video the night of Stacy Jones's murder is registered to a woman named Alicia Wyatt.
The police are stunned. Who is Alicia Wyatt? Given the nature of Stacy's job, is she someone that was a client, a parolee?
Or was she related to someone who was?
While police are dispatched to find Alicia Wyatt,
Got the records?
detectives dig deeper into Stacy's case files.
They don't find any parolees with the last name Wyatt, or anyone listing her as a contact.
So now the police are really trying to figure out how these two women are connected.
Detectives also reach back out to Stacy's coworker, who says the name doesn't sound familiar.
The only option detectives have at this point was to follow up on Corey's alibi.
Police went to speak to Corey's wife.
Do you know a woman named Stacy Jones?
Who?
Corey's wife immediately denies any knowledge of anyone named Stacy Jones.
No, but I wouldn't be surprised whoever she is if she's pregnant.
Why do you say that?
Whether she wasn't familiar with Stacy, but she still knew that her man was cheating on her.
Because according to her, this isn't the first time it's happened.
She knew this guy had multiple women. She even told him, like, I'm familiar with this lifestyle that he has. So was it love? Was the financial gain? What was it that was keeping her there with Corey?
You think Corey's capable of murder?
Corey? No. He's never been violent with anyone else that I know of.
He had other children with women who were not his wife. There was no evidence they ever attempted to harm those women attempted to threaten them so that they would not have these children. So it is curious as to why Stacey Jones having his child would be the trigger for him.
Corey's wife also confirms his alibi.
She indicated to them that on the night of the shooting, he had been at home in the garage, both working on a vehicle and also working out. This was something that Corey did on a daily basis.
And our son was out there most of the evening with him.
According to Corey's wife, their son came back inside and got ready for bed around 10:30.
She said she went to bed around then as well, but the garage light was still on.
Do you mind if we see this garage?
Sure. This way.
Before leaving, detectives take a look around the garage.
As expected, there's a home gym and a workshop area.
But that's not all detectives find.
Upon searching the garage, they found cans of white spray paint.
Given the graffiti at the crime scene, this grabbed detectives' attention.
This stuff belonged to Corey?
Actually, all that paint is mine. I use it for screen printing.
Corey Deering's wife told him that she used the spray paint in order to do screen printing of T-shirts and that Corey would help her with that from time to time.
So was it the same paint or just a coincidence?
Detectives wrap up at Corey's house. But when they return to the station, it's to sad news.
Homicide.
Stacey's baby didn't make it.
The young boy did survive for only 4 days.
He was on the life reserve, but they told him even if he lived, he'd never be no good. So they made the decision to take him off life preserve. It was rough.
The baby succumbed to the injuries, not from the shooting, but from the lack of oxygen received because of the condition of its mother when its mother was killed.
So now, as far as from the police standpoint, it's become a double homicide investigation.
But was Corey the killer?
Detectives get some more insight when they finally receive his cell phone records.
It's not about what they find, but what they don't find.
There's no activity on the phone between 10:30 p.m. and 1 a.m., which would have been around the time of Stacey's murder.
Usually when you have cell phones, they're able to ping off of different cell towers to kind of outline where you are in the area or even to show that the phone was in use. What stood out to the police in this moment was that there was no activity whatsoever.
But at 1 a.m., he suddenly places a single phone call.
He placed a call to Alicia Wyatt.
We got him.
Detectives investigating the murders of Stacey Jones and her newborn child have just uncovered tangible evidence connecting her ex-boyfriend, 39-year-old Corey Deering, to the shooting.
On the night of the shooting, Corey Deering had called Alicia Wyatt.
Alicia was the owner of the SUV seen riding past Stacey's house before the shooting.
And when the detectives finally sit down with Alicia, they learn that the phone call isn't the only thing connecting her to Corey.
She's currently pregnant by Corey as well.
Convinced that Alicia must know something about Stacey's murder, they press her to tell them what happened that night.
It doesn't take long for her to fold.
It's true, Corey did call me that night.
According to Alicia Wyatt, on the night of the shooting, Corey Deering had asked her to come pick him up from the alley outside of his home where he was working out.
Give me your phone.
What for?
Does it matter?
Corey took her cell phone as well as his own and left it in the area of where his home was.
He was aware of cell phone triangulations, so he did not take these cell phones to the vicinity of the crime that he obviously had premeditated.
Then Alicia says Corey instructed her to drive to a neighborhood she'd never been to.
Alicia doesn't ask a lot of questions. This is her man. She trusts him.
According to Alicia, at some point, Corey told her to stop, and he got out of the vehicle.
Just wait right here.
Corey goes around the corner. She's not privy to see what has happened, but what she can say has happened is that during his absence, she's heard gunshots ring out.
And then he came back a few minutes later out of breath. What happened?
Drive up the block.
He instructed her to drive to a different area where he got out of the car again and finally came back to the car the second time, panting and sweating.
When he returned to the vehicle, he was very stoic.
Shortly thereafter, they leave the scene.
Alicia says she dropped him off. He gave her back her phone and then called her a bit later after she returned home.
Then I heard about the murder on the news and I recognized the house and I didn't know what to do.
Alicia suspected that Corey was involved in something, although she never asked him what he did, and she never actually saw him do anything. She was afraid for her own safety.
And you didn't know what his plans were?
No, I swear I had no clue what he was doing.
Ultimately, detectives believe her. They think she really had no idea what Corey was going to do.
So they let her go.
Her statements were very consistent with what was known at the time. She was, police believe, a pawn.
But her statement is enough to get an arrest warrant for Corey.
Corey was charged with at least 2 counts of first-degree murder, both for Stacey Jones and for the child that was born and lived for 4 days.
Once he's arrested, Corey refuses to speak to police.
But Corey's lack of cooperation hardly matters once detectives are able to confiscate his phone.
Apparently, Corey liked to record his workouts, even one from the night of the murder.
During the recording of the workout, he had on a certain sweatshirt that had a certain distinct marking on it, consistent with the distinct marking that they saw on the individual who shot Stacey Jones.
I guess the idea is to show that he's, hey, I'm at my garage working and nowhere near the crime scene, but you forgot to take off a very descriptive sweatshirt.
And on June 6, 2023, the case goes to trial.
On the one side, you have the prosecution who has said that, yes, this man was a philanderer. Yes, he stepped outside of his marriage. But this baby was one baby too many.
Why don't you just come out and talk to me?
Listen, I've already told you, there's nothing you can say that's going to convince me to change my mind.
What about me? What about my family?
What about me? What about this baby?
And as soon as Stacey turned her back, Corey carried out his plan.
Corey refused to let Stacey see the end of her pregnancy.
The evidence in the case was overwhelming in terms of the diabolical nature of what Corey did. From the concealing of the cell phones and leaving those behind, to the spray painting outside of the home with an attempt to mislead police.
When you put all of those pieces together, it's a smoking gun.
In response, Corey's defense points the finger back at Alicia Wyatt.
In a jury trial, the defense team is hoping to create any type of reasonable doubt.
His lawyer proceeded with a theory that Alicia was motivated to kill Stacey Jones because she was also impregnated by Corey Deering.
But the jury doesn't buy it.
Fortunately for Stacey's family, the prosecution has met its burden and the state has proven its case. And he is convicted of not 1, but 2 murders.
Once Corey was found guilty of both of those murder counts, the court had no choice but to sentence him to natural life in prison. That is a mandatory sentence in the state of Illinois when there is more than 1 person killed in an incident.
Even though Corey will spend the rest of his life behind bars, Stacy's family feels a lingering frustration that Alicia will never face any legal consequences for her actions.
She drove him. She could have called the police. When she heard the shots, she could have called the police then. So honestly, I think she should be in jail too for accessory before and after the fact.
But no amount of punishment can replace the loss of a young mother who was doing her best to raise 2 good sons, with another one on the way.
There really isn't a win. Stacy's family will never be the same. I know nothing can ever bring her back. For the kids who were involved, to bring their mother back, no sense of justice, but I would hope that they would find their path of healing for themselves.
An October night in Chicago carries an unrelenting, bone-chilling air swept straight off the vast and freezing expanse of Lake Michigan, a sharp, biting draft that weaves its way silently through quiet, brick-lined residential corridors of the Jeffrey Manor neighborhood. The clock on the dashboard of a parked cruiser reads precisely 12:06 a.m. on October 13th, 2020. This sprawling Midwest metropolis of nearly 10 million souls, rich in towering architectural marvels and historic asphalt veins, has ostensibly surrendered to a deep, heavy slumber, casting its endless network of highways and side streets into an opaque, brooding darkness. Yet, beneath the veneer of midnight tranquility, the city never truly sleeps. It breathes, it watches, and on this particular night, it holds its breath just before a violent rupture shatters the fragile peace of the South Side. The urban landscape of Chicago is a study in stark, beautiful contradictions. It boasts world-class cultural institutions, breathtaking waterfronts, and glittering downtown skylines, but also carries the deep, structural scars of stark economic and racial divides. Crime is an undeniable, grim reality woven into the daily fabric of the city, prompting law enforcement to adopt cutting-edge technological sentinels to combat the relentless tide of violence. Among the most sophisticated of these tools is ShotSpotter, an advanced acoustic, sound-driven sensor network mounted discreetly across the urban expanse, constantly listening, analyzing, and triangulating concussive shock waves of gunfire long before a panicked citizen can even manage to dial 911. It is an unblinking electronic ear that never rests, engineered precisely for the split-second crises that define life in America's third-largest city. At precisely 12:06 a.m., the ShotSpotter system abruptly awakens the dispatch centers, flashing urgent, high-priority red alerts across computer monitors. Several rapid, deafening gunshots have just torn through the quiet air of the Jeffrey Manor community, specifically centered off 95th Street. Jeffrey Manor is historically a peaceful, tight-knit neighborhood on Chicago's far south side, an area defined by modest single-family homes, well-tended lawns, and a relative absence of the chaotic street crime that plagues other parts of the metropolis. It is a place where neighbors know one another by name, where children play safely in sun-drenched yards, and where residents take immense pride in their sanctuary of domestic stability. Instantly, the radio airwaves crackle to life with urgency. 10 to 64. Officer response needed immediately to the area of 95th Street. ShotSpotter acoustic alert triggered. Multiple rounds discharged. 10 to 4. Badge 2366. En route to the location. First responders mobilized with terrifying speed, their cruiser tires screeching against the damp asphalt as they cut through the labyrinth of residential blocks, emergency lights casting strobe-like beams of crimson and blue against the sleeping facades of homes. When the patrol units arrive at the designated address, they step out into an eerie, suffocating silence that hangs heavily over property. The scene unfolding before their eyes is one of immediate, heart-stopping gravity. Lying face down on the cold concrete walkway just outside the front entrance of a residence is a woman. Her body is motionless, save for the shallow, ragged rise and fall of her chest as she fights desperately for oxygen. Blood is already pooling beneath her, seeping silently into the porous stone, dark and ominous under the harsh glare of the squad car headlights. The officers rush forward, their training kicking in as they drop to their knees on the unforgiving pavement, assessing the catastrophic damage. We still got a pulse. Stay with me, ma'am. Can you hear me? The realization hits the responding officers with sickening force. This is not merely a routine shooting call. The woman lying bleeding on the ground is visibly, heavily pregnant. approximately 8 months along, carrying a full-term child on the very precipice of life. Every instinct screamed for immediate action. The number one duty of a law enforcement officer is the preservation of life. And tonight, there are 2 precious lives hanging by the slenderest of threads. Paramedics are summoned with a frantic call for emergency medical backup as officers gently stabilize her, checking for wounds and trying desperately to keep her conscious. Amidst the chaos, as emergency medical technicians prepare to lift her onto a stretcher, a startling physical detail drops silently from the folds of her clothing. A 9mm semi-automatic pistol tumbles from her waistband onto the ground. The presence of a firearm immediately elevates the tension of the scene. A woman lying gravely wounded with a weapon tucked into her clothes suggests a chilling premonition. It strongly indicates that she sensed danger, that she anticipated a threat lurking in the shadows, and that she expected a confrontation on her own doorstep. Yet, the weapon remained unshot. It was never drawn, never fired in self-defense. Why? Did she know her assailant so well, trusted them so completely, that she let her guard down entirely before the fatal blows were struck? As EMTs load her into the back of the screaming ambulance, speeding off into the night toward the hospital with sirens wailing, the patrol officers turn their attention to the immediate surroundings of the home, securing perimeter for incoming homicide detectives and crime scene technicians. What they discover next on the exterior walls of the residence plunges the investigation into a realm of immediate, systemic terror. Splashed across the pristine white siding of the house, stark and fresh in the glow of crime scene lights, are spray-painted letters, KKK. The inclusion of the Ku Klux Klan acronym instantly casts a terrifying shadow over the investigation, suggesting to any observer that this was not a random act of urban violence, but calculated, racially motivated hate crime directed at a defenseless pregnant mother in a predominantly minority neighborhood. It is a deliberate, provocative statement left by the killer, a neon signpost designed to draw the eyes of the police toward deep-seated racial animus, white supremacy, and societal prejudice. Yet, as the veteran detectives arrive and begin to walk the perimeter, taking the cold facts of the Jeffrey Manor geography, the hate crime hypothesis begins to fray at the edges. Jeffrey Manor is a deeply established, predominantly African-American and Hispanic community. It is a close-knit, self-contained labyrinth of streets where outsiders stand out like beacons, and where organized extremist groups do not simply operate in the shadows of residential porches. The neighborhood is a maze, a tight grid that would confound an erratic drive-by shooter looking to make a random statement of racial terror. Why would a white supremacist group target a single pregnant mother on her own front porch with spray paint, yet leave behind no other indicators, no manifestos, no wider campaign of terror in the surrounding blocks? The graffiti feels too theatrical, too deliberate, too neat. It bears the unmistakable hallmark of a smokescreen, a desperate, calculated attempt by a cunning perpetrator to construct a labyrinth of confusion, to point the finger of justice away from the human heart and toward a phantom societal monster. Inside the house, sleeping soundly through the thunderous cracks of gunfire that claimed their mother's evening peace, are 2 young boys, ages 11 and 7, completely unaware that their world has just been violently, irrevocably shattered. When officers finally clear the residence and discover the children unharmed in their beds, the tragedy deepens into an unbearable emotional abyss. These innocent boys are now thrust into the agonizing reality of orphanhood before the sun has even risen to greet a new day. As the crime scene tape flutters in the cold October wind, locking down the blood-stained concrete, the shell casings, and the mocking white paint of the KKK insignia, the investigation officially begins. The detectives are left standing in the dark, staring at a puzzle where the pieces have been deliberately poisoned with false leads. They do not yet know the name Stacy Jones, nor do they understand the intricate, suffocating web of romance, betrayal, desperation, and hidden financial ruin that brought an executioner to her doorstep. They only know that a mother's life is ebbing away on a hospital gurney, that an unborn child's heart is fighting for every beat, and that somewhere out in the sprawling, indifferent expanse of Chicago, a monster wearing a mask of a community pillar is walking away into the night, believing he has successfully buried his sins beneath a shroud of engineered racial hatred. The stage is set for a harrowing descent into the darkest corners of human manipulation, a journey where the truth, when finally unearthed, will prove far more sickening than any ghost story painted on a wall. The transition from the rustic, rolling hills of Tennessee to the sprawling, monolithic embrace of a major metropolitan area like Chicago is never merely a change of address. It is a seismic psychological shift that demands a complete restructuring of one's worldview, safety parameters, and interpersonal dynamics. For 35-year-old Stacey Jones, this monumental relocation was undertaken with a singular, unyielding vision: to forge a brighter, safer, and more economically secure future for her two young sons, 11-year-old and 7-year-old boys who were the very center of her universe. Stacey was the epitome of a dedicated mother, a woman whose entire daily existence revolved around the meticulous orchestration of her children's happiness, education, and physical well-being. To afford her family the life they deserved, she sought out professional stability that matched her deep-seated commitment to justice and community service, ultimately accepting a demanding position as a probation officer with Cook County. The role carried a higher salary scale in Illinois compared to her previous employment in Tennessee, providing the vital financial footing necessary to secure a foothold in the competitive Chicago housing market. Her perseverance paid off when she successfully acquired a home in Jeffrey Manor, a quiet, established residential enclave nestled on Chicago's far south side off 95th Street. For Stacey, moving into Jeffrey Manor felt like striking gold. The neighborhood offers serene suburban aesthetic within the boundaries of the great metropolis, characterized by tree-lined streets, well-manicured lawns, and a tight-knit community spirit where residents watched out for one another's children. It was a place where she could finally breathe a sigh of relief, believing she constructed a secure fortress of domestic tranquility where her boys could grow up unhindered by the chaotic violence that so frequently haunted other zip codes of the city. Furthermore, Chicago came equipped with a built-in familial safety net. Members of her mother's extended family live within the metropolitan area, offering a ready-made support system of aunts, cousins, and grandparents who were eager to embrace Stacey and her sons, helping to shoulder the logistical burdens of raising a family in a fast-paced urban environment. Professionally, Stacey thrived in the high-stakes world of the criminal justice system. As a probation officer, she navigated the complex, often heartbreaking intersection of punishment and rehabilitation. While popular culture often paints probation officers as hardened bureaucrats dealing exclusively with dangerous recidivists, Stacey approached her caseload with a rare blend of firm authority and genuine human empathy. She understood that many of the individuals assigned to her supervision were trapped in generational cycles of poverty, addiction, and poor decision-making. Rather than viewing them merely as file numbers, she invested emotional energy into steering them toward a better path, hoping against hope that they would choose rehabilitation over return tickets to the state penitentiary. Her colleagues at the Cook County Department universally respected her work ethic, noting her sharp intellect, her unwavering dedication, and the master's degree she had earned in criminal justice and forensics, which served as a foundation for her ambitious academic trajectory. She was actively laying plans to pursue a doctorate in forensic science. She wore her law enforcement affiliation with quiet pride, fully cognizant of the inherent risks associated with the badge, yet believing deeply in the protective shield of the rule of law. Yet, life in a massive urban center like Chicago is a tapestry woven with contrasting threads of brilliant community warmth and hidden, volatile currents. While Jeffrey Manor provided a peaceful sanctuary during daylight hours, the broader city remained a place of stark socioeconomic divides, with the glittering lakeside skylines of downtown, contrasted sharply with the desperate economic struggles of the South and West Sides. Crime was an ever-present specter, monitored constantly by the city's heavy reliance on advanced technological surveillance, including the acoustic gunshot detection grids of ShotSpotter. Stacey knew the realities of the streets, but inside the four walls of her newly acquired home, her focus was entirely domestic, centered on the simple joys of motherhood, career advancement, and the comforting routines of raising her active, sports-loving boys. To keep her sons disciplined, focused, and healthy, Stacey ensured their schedules were perpetually packed with extracurricular activities. Football, baseball, karate. If it burned energy and taught teamwork, her boys were enrolled in it. It was through this commitment to her children's athletic pursuits that Stacey's own personal orbit intersected with a man who would ultimately become the architect of her destruction. On the local youth football team, her eldest son was placed under the guidance of a 39-year-old coach named Corey Deering. To the outside observer, Corey Deering was the quintessential pillar of the community, a local fixture who had dedicated over a decade of his life to working with the Chicago Park District, coaching youth sports, mentoring troubled kids, and acting as a go-to-neighborhood handyman for any civic need or crisis. If a fence needed mending, if a park bench was broken, or if a child needed a ride home from practice, Corey was universally recognized as a dependable, smiling face who stepped up to the plate. At first, Stacy viewed Corey through the appreciative lens of a grateful mother watching a dedicated mentor pour time and energy into developing her son's athletic talents. During team practices, as she stood on the sidelines wrapped in a jacket against the autumn chill, brief conversational exchanges between the mother and the coach naturally blossomed. "Your son, he's an absolute natural out there on the gridiron," Corey noted one afternoon, offering a warm, reassuring smile as the boys took a water break. "Does he practice these plays at home with his dad?" Stacy offered a soft, slightly melancholic smile, shaking her head. "No, it's just me. He's not around." In that vulnerable admission, a bridge was crossed. Corey leaned into moment with practiced charm, displaying an empathetic warmth that deeply resonated with a single mother carrying the immense weight of raising two boys entirely on her own. He listened intently as she spoke of her move from Tennessee, her aspirations for her children, and her demanding career as a probation officer. In return, Corey shared stories of his long-standing dedication to the youth of Chicago, painting a portrait of a selfless community servant whose entire existence was seemingly dedicated to lifting others up. Stacy found herself increasingly drawn to him. There was an undeniable magnetism in his apparent selflessness, a comforting illusion of absolute reliability that made her feel safe in a city that could often feel overwhelmingly vast and indifferent. For Corey Deering, the attraction was equally calculated and immediate. As an individual accustomed to moving through neighborhood circles with effortless charisma, he recognized in Stacy a woman of substance, intelligent, successful, professionally accomplished, and deeply loving. What began as polite, sideline pleasantries quickly escalated into intense private conversations, late-night phone calls, and clandestine meetings away from the football field. Within a matter of months, the professional boundaries dissolved entirely, replaced by a passionate romance. Stacy, who had spent years fighting tooth and nail to build a stable, loving environment for her sons, genuinely believed she had finally found her equal, a dependable partner who not only loved her, but actively embraced and cared for her boys. The relationship moved at a rapid, intoxicating pace. They fell deeply in love, wrapped up in the heady rush of mutual affection and the comforting illusion of a shared future. For Stacy, who had long shouldered the emotional and financial burdens of single parenthood, the prospect of building a life with an upstanding community leader felt like the ultimate reward for years of struggle. Then, amid the swirling romance, came a life-altering surprise that filled her heart with boundless joy. Stacy discovered she was pregnant. She was going to have her third child. As the reality of the pregnancy set in, Stacy's excitement knew no bounds. Knowing from early medical ultrasounds that she was carrying another baby boy only heightened her maternal anticipation. She already possessed a masterclass in raising strong, independent young boys, and the thought of expanding her family with a man she believed was her lifelong partner filled her with an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. During the early months of the gestation period, Stacy wasted no time transforming her domestic space to welcome the new arrival. She shopped for cribs, painted nursery walls in gentle pastel hues, organized tiny clothes, and mapped out a future where her three sons would grow up side by side in the comfort of their Jeffrey Manor home. She was truly, profoundly happy, intoxicated by the bright promise of tomorrow. Yet, beneath the radiant surface of Stacy's maternal joy, the foundation of her romance with Corey Deering was beginning to fracture along deeply hidden fault lines. Corey was not the unattached, devoted bachelor he had projected himself to be to the trusting mother from Tennessee. He was a married man, leading a deeply compartmentalized double life, weaving a complex web of deception that extended far beyond his domestic household with his legal wife. As Stacy's pregnancy progressed visibly into the second and third trimesters, the reality of the impending birth presented an existential threat to the carefully curated image Corey had spent years cultivating in the community. A public child with Stacy meant the catastrophic unmasking of his infidelity, the destruction of his marriage, potential financial ruin through mandatory child support obligations, and the utter obliteration of his spotless reputation as a pillar of the Chicago Park District. What had begun as a passionate, comforting romance devolved rapidly into a psychological battlefield of covert desperation. As Stacy's belly swelled with the life of their unborn son, Corey's warmth vanished, replaced by cold indifference, mounting irritation, and eventually open hostility. He made it abundantly clear that he wanted nothing to do with the baby, demanding that Stacy undergo an abortion to erase the evidence of his betrayal. But Stacy Jones was not a woman easily cowed by intimidation. As a trained probation officer who had spent years staring down violent offenders and navigating the darkest corridors of the criminal justice system, her core was forged from absolute steel. She refused his demands. She loved the life growing inside her, and she firmly believed that a father should take financial and moral responsibility for his child, whether he wished to maintain a domestic relationship with her or not. The refusal to bow to his demands triggered a dark, psychotic transformation in the man the neighborhood viewed as a gentle giant. The more Stacy asserted her independence and advanced further along in her pregnancy, the more hostile and threatening Corey became. The sweet-talking youth football coach gave way to a controlling, paranoid predator who viewed the unborn child not as a miracle of life, but as a ticking time bomb threatening to detonate his entire existence. The threats began as subtle warnings whispered in quiet corners, but quickly escalated into explicit, terrifying declarations. According to those close to Stacy, Corey made it unmistakably clear that he would go to any lengths to stop the birth, culminating in a chilling, explicit threat delivered when Stacy was well into her third trimester. Corey told her bluntly that she would never make it to the end of the pregnancy. For a brief, terrifying period, the sheer weight of these menaces paralyzed Stacy with fear. She realized she was intimately entangled with a man whose public mask of civic virtue was a hollow sham masking a ruthless, predatory core. Yet, true to her resilient character, fear eventually gave way to a fierce, protective defiance. As her due date approached, Stacy stopped hiding in the shadows of apprehension. Believing that daylight was the best disinfectant, and recognizing that Corey's unwillingness to pay child support or acknowledge paternity was both a moral failure and a legal injustice, she decided to take matters into her own hands. In the weeks leading up to October 2020, Stacy initiated her own private investigation into Corey Deering's background, gathering financial records, legal documentation, and proof of paternity with the explicit intention of filing formal child support and custody petitions through the Illinois family court system. She was preparing to legally corner a man who was accustomed to controlling every narrative in his life. She was stepping onto the offensive, armed with the law, her professional expertise, and an unshakable maternal resolve. But Stacy did not realize the terrifying magnitude of what she was up against. She did not know that Corey Deering was already intimately familiar with navigating the perilous waters of multiple paternity claims, nor did she understand that to a man whose entire social standing hung by a thread, the threat of public exposure and financial ruin was an intolerable insult punishable by death. As the autumn winds grew colder across the south side of Chicago, setting the stage for the fateful midnight hours of October 13th, 2020, Stacy Jones sat in her Jeffrey Manor home, surrounded by the half-assembled nursery furniture for a baby boy who would never see the light of day. She believed the worst of the threats were behind her, that the proximity of her due date acted as a natural shield, and that her upcoming legal filing would force accountability. She let her guard down just enough to answer a late-night knock on her door, unaware that the man standing in the darkness outside was carrying not a resolution, but a loaded 9mm pistol and a can of white spray paint, ready to write a bloody punctuation mark to a tragedy that had been months in the making. The portrait of a human life cannot be adequately captured merely by charting the chronological milestones of its existence or listing the titles and credentials accumulated along the way. True understanding requires an intimate exploration of the heart, the quiet struggles, the fierce loyalties, and the radiant dreams that animated a person from within. 35-year-old Stacy Jones was much more than a dedicated professional upholding the law or a mother managing the daily logistics of a bustling household. She was a vibrant, deeply feeling soul whose entire existence was defined by an unyielding capacity for love, an infectious optimism, and a relentless dedication to lifting up everyone who crossed her path. To fully grasp the magnitude of the tragedy that would eventually pierce the heart of Jeffrey Manor, one must first look deeply into the essence of who Stacy was, honoring the warmth she brought to the world and the profound legacy she left behind in the lives of her 2 young sons. Long before she ever set foot in the sprawling, windswept metropolis of Chicago, Stacy's roots were firmly planted in the rich soil of Tennessee, where she cultivated the foundational values of hard work, deep spiritual faith, and an unshakable commitment to family. Growing up in the South, she learned early on that life's true wealth is measured not by material accumulation, but by the depth of one's character and the sincerity of one's relationships. She was a woman who possessed an innate sense of empathy, an intuitive ability to look past the rough exterior of troubled individuals and recognize the fragile humanity beating beneath. This profound compassion was not merely a passive personality trait. It became the guiding compass of her professional life, steering her away from comfortable desk jobs and pulling her toward the demanding, often heartbreaking arena of the criminal justice system. When Stacy made the courageous decision to uproot her life and move north to Chicago, she did so with a singular, heroic objective: to carve out a safer, broader horizon of opportunity for her 2 beloved boys, 11-year-old and 7-year-old children, who were the absolute center of her gravitational pull. Transitioning from the slower, more intimate rhythm of Tennessee to the high-stakes, fast-paced intensity of America's 3rd-largest city was no small feat, but Stacy tackled the challenge with characteristic grace and unyielding determination. She secured a demanding position as a probation officer with Cook County, stepping willingly into a world where danger and despair often walked hand in hand. While many viewed the role through the lens of strict bureaucracy and surveillance, Stacy approached her caseload with a unique blend of firm authority and radical compassion. She understood intimately that the individuals assigned to her supervision, many of them trapped in cyclical webs of poverty, addiction, and poor choices, were often desperately searching for someone who would simply believe in their capacity for redemption. She listened when they spoke, held them accountable when they faltered, and cheered genuinely for their victories, no matter how small. Her colleagues in the Cook County Department quickly grew to admire her fierce work ethic, her sharp analytical mind, and the warm, reassuring presence she brought to an otherwise sterile institutional environment. Yet, Stacy's professional ambitions extended far beyond the daily caseload of a probation officer. Driven by an insatiable intellectual curiosity and a deep-seated desire to effect meaningful systemic change, she had already earned her master's degree in criminal justice and forensics, transforming her academic achievements into stepping stones for an even grander vision. In quiet moments, surrounded by textbooks and the soft cluttered domestic life, she frequently mapped out her next big milestone, pursuing a doctorate in forensic science. She wanted to prove to her sons that education was the ultimate equalizer, a powerful tool of empowerment that no one could ever take away from them. She wore her affiliation with the law enforcement community with a quiet, dignified pride, acutely aware that the badge carried inherent risks, but placing her ultimate faith in the protective power of justice, integrity, and rule of law. Outside of her demanding career, Stacy's universe was entirely illuminated by the radiant energy of her 2 boys. She was a quintessential modern single mother, a superhero without a cape who managed the impossible daily juggling act of career advancement, household management, and round-the-clock parenting with inspiring, effortless grace. She understood that raising young boys in a bustling urban environment required structure, discipline, and plenty of physical outlets to burn off their boundless energy. To ensure they stayed focused, healthy, and grounded, she filled their schedules with a rich array of extracurricular activities. If there was a football practice, a baseball game, or a karate class, Stacy was there on the sidelines, cheering louder than anyone else, her face flushed with maternal pride as she recorded videos of their athletic triumphs on her phone. She was the kind of mother who knew every detail of their lives, their favorite foods, their secret fears, the names of their closest friends, and the exact tenor of their laughter when something genuinely amused them. Her home was not merely a physical structure of brick and mortar. It was a sanctuary of warmth, laughter, and unconditional love, a safe harbor where the harsh realities of the outside world were melted away by the comforting embrace of a mother who loved her children with every fiber of her being. Finding a home in the Jeffrey Manor neighborhood on Chicago's far south side felt like a monumental victory for Stacy. It offered the best of both worlds, a quiet, tree-lined suburban aesthetic complete with well-tended lawns and friendly neighbors, yet anchored firmly within the cultural richness of the Chicago metropolitan area. Here, she believed, she had successfully constructed the secure domestic fortress she had always envisioned for her family. She took immense pride in decorating her new home, transforming each room into a cozy, welcoming space that reflected her bright personality. Furthermore, moving to Chicago reunited her with members of her extended maternal family, creating a built-in support network of aunts, uncles, and cousins who were eager to share in the joys and responsibilities of raising the boys. Family barbecues, holiday gatherings, and impromptu weekend visits filled their calendars with a rich tapestry of shared kinship, reinforcing Stacy's belief that life was finally falling into a harmonious, beautiful rhythm. It was precisely this dedication to her son's athletic development that ultimately led her path to intersect with 39-year-old Corey Deering, the youth football coach whose public facade of civic virtue masked a dark, predatory heart. To Stacy, who was accustomed to carrying the immense weight of single parenthood entirely on her own, Corey initially appeared as a godsend, a dependable, community-minded mentor who poured genuine care and energy into coaching her eldest son. In the quiet moments between drills, as autumn winds rustled to the park, their casual sideline conversations naturally deepened. Stacy found herself drawn to his apparent selflessness, his easy charisma, and the comforting illusion of absolute reliability that he projected. For a woman who spent her days navigating the troubled waters of the criminal justice system and her evenings managing a household of energetic boys, the prospect of sharing her life with a man who seemed so rooted in community service felt like a rare, precious gift. The romance that blossomed between them moved with a swift, intoxicating intensity. Stacy, whose heart had long been guarded by the practical necessities of survival and motherhood, surrendered fully to the warmth of being cherished. She believed she had found her equal, a partner who would stand beside her, share the burdens of life, and love her boys as fiercely as she did. When she discovered she was pregnant with her third child, the joy that flooded her soul was boundless. Knowing from early medical scans that she was carrying another baby boy only amplified her excitement. She already possessed a masterclass in raising strong, compassionate young men, and the thought of expanding her family with a man she trusted implicitly filled her with an overwhelming sense of completion. During the initial months of her pregnancy, Stacy's happiness was palpable and radiant. She wasted no time preparing her Jeffrey Manor home for the new arrival, pouring her creativity and love into designing a nursery bathed in soft pastel tones, assembling a brand new crib, and folding microscopic onesies with meticulous care. She was envisioning a future where her 3 sons would grow up side by side, a tight-knit trio anchored by her unwavering devotion. She made plans, dreamed out loud, and embraced every physical and emotional milestone of her pregnancy with a joyful, expectant heart. She was a woman fully alive, resting in the secure belief that she had built a beautiful, unshakable life for herself and her children. Yet, as the months progressed and her pregnancy became visibly undeniable, the dark, fragile fault lines of Corey Deering's hidden double life began to crack open, threatening to shatter the idyllic world Stacy had so carefully constructed. Corey was not the unattached, honorable bachelor he portrayed. He was a married man trapped in a web of his own deceit, terrified of exposure, scandal, and financial ruin. As Stacy's belly swelled with the life of their unborn child, Corey's affectionate warmth evaporated entirely, replaced by a chilling coldness, erratic hostility, and frantic demands that she terminate the pregnancy to protect his public image and his marriage. To anyone who knew Stacy well, the idea that she would simply fold under such cowardly pressure was laughable. She was a trained probation officer who had stared down hardened criminals. She was a fiercely independent mother who had built a successful life from the ground up, and above all, she was a woman whose maternal instincts were absolute. She refused his demands unequivocally. She loved the innocent life growing inside her, and while she did not demand that Corey maintain a romantic relationship with her, she firmly insisted that he shoulder his moral and financial responsibilities as a father. This unwavering stance transformed the dynamic from a bitter personal dispute into a terrifying psychological war. The man who had once played the role of devoted mentor devolved into a desperate, controlling predator, showering her with threats and intimidation as her due date drew closer. Yet, even in the face of escalating danger, Stacy's resilient spirit never truly faltered. Rather than cowering in fear, she chose to step onto the offensive, launching her own private investigation into Corey's background and financial assets to prepare for formal child support and paternity filings in the Illinois courts. She was determined to ensure justice for her unborn child, believing that the rule of law and the sunlight of truth would ultimately protect her. The tragedy of Stacey Jones lies not simply in the fact that her life was brutally cut short on a cold October midnight in 2020, but in the exquisite, vibrant beauty of the life she was so courageously building. She was a woman of substance, intelligence, and boundless heart. A devoted mother who lived every single day for her boys, a dedicated public servant who sought to heal a broken world, and a gentle soul who believed in the inherent goodness of others right up until the moment her path crossed with a monster who could not tolerate her light. The physical sanctuary she created in Jeffrey Manor may have been breached by violence, and the nursery she painted with such tender care may have ultimately stood empty, but the resonance of Stacey's extraordinary spirit, her fierce maternal love, and her unyielding courage could never be extinguished by a cowardly act of malice. Her memory remains enshrined eternally in the hearts of her sons, her grieving family, and everyone who had the privilege of knowing the brilliant, beautiful light that was Stacey Jones. The immediate aftermath of a violent crime in a major metropolitan area like Chicago is a chaotic vortex of wailing sirens, flashing crimson lights, and frantic administrative coordination. But beneath the frantic motion lies a cold, clinical precision executed by the men and women of the Chicago Police Department's Homicide Division. When detectives arrived at a crime scene in Jeffrey Manor in the pre-dawn hours of October 13, 2020, they stepped into a sobering reality of blood, damp concrete, and deliberate deception. The body of 35-year-old Stacey Jones had already been rushed away by emergency medical technicians in a desperate, last-ditch race against death, leaving behind a cold perimeter defined by yellow police tape, scattered shell casings, and the glaring, mocking white paint of the KKK spray-painted across the exterior wall of her home. For any seasoned homicide investigator, a crime scene bearing explicit racial slurs or extremist acronyms immediately demands a specific protocol of inquiry. The presence of the Ku Klux Klan insignia casts an ominous, racially charged shadow over the initial hours of the case, suggesting to outside observers that a pregnant mother had fallen victim to an act of targeted, hate-driven domestic terrorism. Yet, veteran detectives trained to look past theatrical smoke screens quickly recognized the profound incongruities of the physical environment. Jeffrey Manor was a close-knit, predominantly minority neighborhood, a tightly woven grid where outsiders stood out conspicuously, and where an organized hate group did not simply operate as casual midnight vandals on private residential porches without raising immediate alarm. The graffiti lacked the chaotic spontaneity of a genuine hate crime. It felt calculated, overly theatrical, and glaringly out of place, bearing all the classic hallmarks of a deliberate diversion designed to pull law enforcement away from the true interpersonal dynamics of the victim's life. As crime scene technicians meticulously gathered forensic evidence, swabbing the spray paint, bagging the 9mm shell casings, and recovering the semi-automatic handgun that had tumbled from Stacey's waistband, homicide detectives turned their attention inward, looking past exterior walls and into the private world of the woman fighting for her life in the hospital. Inside the residence, officers had already made the heartbreaking discovery of Stacey's 2 young sons asleep in their beds, blissfully unaware that their mother had just been hunted down outside their window. When family members were urgently notified and rushed to the scene to take custody of the terrified, grieving boys, a flood of vital personal context began to pour into the investigation. The grieving relatives did not speak of political extremists, anonymous stalkers, or racial animus. Instead, their voices trembled with a singular, burning name: Corey Deering. Within hours of the shooting, as investigators formally interviewed family members, friends, and co-workers, a comprehensive, toxic portrait of Stacey's recent personal life began to crystallize. The narrative of a random act of racial violence evaporated completely, replaced by a much darker, painfully familiar human tragedy born of illicit romance, unwanted pregnancy, and desperate self-preservation. Detectives learned of the secret relationship between Stacey and Corey Deering, the 39-year-old youth football coach and Chicago Park District employee whom Stacey's eldest son had known through sports. They discovered that what had begun as innocent sideline conversations had blossomed into a passionate affair, culminating in Stacey's pregnancy, a pregnancy that Corey had desperately wanted erased. Witnesses recounted Corey's mounting hostility, his repeated demands that Stacy undergo an abortion to protect his public reputation and his marriage, and his explicit, chilling threats delivered when she refused to bow to his coercion, warnings that she would never make it to the end of her term. Armed with these compelling witness testimonies and familial accounts, homicide detectives turned their investigative focus squarely toward Corey Deering. However, building an airtight criminal case against a deeply embedded, smooth-talking community figure required hard, irrefutable physical and digital evidence. Murder investigations are not solved on suspicion alone. They demand a meticulous assembly of timelines, digital footprints, and forensic validation that can withstand the rigorous scrutiny of a court of law. Investigators immediately secured search and arrest warrants, diving headfirst into the digital lives of both the victim and the prime suspect, pulling cellular tower data, GPS tracking information, and electronic communications that would ultimately trace Corey's movements through the darkened streets of Chicago on the night of the murder. The digital dragnet began to close with lethal precision. Cell phone tower analysis and historical location data, subpoenaed by investigators, revealed a damning narrative that completely shattered the alibi Corey had likely prepared for himself. On the night of October 12th into the early morning hours of October 13th, digital records placed Corey's mobile device moving away from his own residence and tracing a deliberate path toward the far south side of Chicago, pinging off cell towers in immediate proximity to Jeffrey Manor precisely around the time of the ShotSpotter acoustic alert at 12:06 a.m. Furthermore, surveillance cameras mounted on neighboring homes and nearby commercial intersections captured shadowy, indistinct footage of a vehicle matching the description of Corey's automobile lingering in the vicinity of Stacy Street, moving with a purposeful, stealthy deliberation before fleeing the scene immediately after the gunfire shattered the midnight silence. Concurrently, the hospital battle came to a heartbreaking, agonizing conclusion. Despite the heroic efforts of emergency medical personnel and trauma surgeons, Stacy Jones's injuries were simply too catastrophic to overcome. Though doctors fought valiantly to save both mother and child, Stacy succumbed to her wounds, and her unborn baby boy, a full-term infant whose nursery had been so lovingly prepared with pastel paint and tiny clothes, perished alongside her. The loss transformed the investigation from an attempted murder inquiry into a double homicide of staggering proportions, heightening the urgency and emotional weight resting on the shoulders of the investigating detectives. The legal system now carried the sacred duty of seeking justice not only for a devoted mother, a dedicated probation officer, and a loving daughter, but also for an innocent, unborn life snuffed out before it ever had the chance to draw its first breath. Faced with a mounting mountain of digital, physical, and testimonial evidence, the Chicago Police Department moved swiftly to apprehend the prime suspect. Days after the shooting, law enforcement units closed in on Corey Deering, arresting him without incident. The man who had spent over a decade projecting an image of selfless civic virtue, coaching youth sports, and acting as a dependable neighborhood handyman suddenly found himself stripped of his public mask, sitting across a cold metal table in an interrogation room facing the unyielding gaze of homicide detectives. The contrast between the public persona of the gentle giant and the cold, calculating reality of an alleged executioner was staggering, serving as a grim reminder of how deeply human darkness can hide behind a benevolent smile. As news of the arrest rippled through the community and media outlets across Chicago picked up the story, the true depths of the deception began to unfold in public view. The spray-painted KKK insignia, the theatrical smokescreen designed to throw investigators off the scent by invoking racial terror, became a central focal point of the prosecution's narrative, not as evidence of a hate crime, but as a cowardly, desperate attempt by a guilty man to manipulate public perception and conceal his own intimate betrayal. Corey Deering had calculated that society would automatically look toward the phantom specter of racial animus rather than suspect a trusted youth sports coach of murdering the mother of his unborn child. It was a cynical, manipulative gamble that ultimately failed under the relentless, analytical weight of police work and forensic science. The ensuing legal proceedings promised to be a profound emotional reckoning, drawing grieving family members, colleagues from the Cook County Probation Department, and shocked members of the community into the courtroom to bear witness to the pursuit of justice. For Stacy's two young boys, now thrust permanently into the agonizing reality of orphanhood, the trial represented a formal acknowledgement of their mother's immense worth and the sheer injustice of her loss. Throughout the grueling months of pretrial hearings and legal maneuverings, the family remained steadfast, channeling their grief into an unyielding demand for accountability, ensuring that Stacy's memory would not be overshadowed by the sensationalized, false narratives attempted by her killer. Ultimately, the fourth chapter of this dark American tragedy stands as a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth in the face of calculated deceit. It highlights a profound dedication of law enforcement officers who refuse to be blinded by a superficial smokescreen, digging instead into the complex, messy realities of human relationships to unmask a predator. The painted letters on the wall of the Jeffrey Manor home may have initially whispered of systemic hatred and societal division, but the cold light of justice exposed them for what they truly were: the desperate graffiti of a cornered coward who thought he could outrun his own conscience. As the judicial machinery ground forward toward trial, the memory of Stacy Jones burned brightly, a shining beacon of maternal love, professional integrity, and unyielding courage that no amount of darkness or deceit could ever truly extinguish. The physical topography of a crime scene often speaks a language of its own, whispering silent narratives of terror, desperation, and calculated intent to the trained eyes of homicide investigators. When the initial chaotic wave of emergency responders, blaring sirens, and flashing patrol lights subsided in the pre-dawn hours of October 13th, 2020, the residential pavement of Jeffrey Manor transformed into a clinical laboratory of forensic recovery. For the veteran detectives of the Chicago Police Department assigned to unravel the murder of Stacy Jones, the primary directive was clear: separate the deliberate theatrical smoke screens from the harsh, unyielding physical reality left behind on the ground. Walking the crime scene required an almost surgical precision. The cool October air was thick with the metallic scent of damp asphalt and lingering in smoke, a heavy, somber atmosphere that hung over the single-family homes lining 95th Street like a shroud. The detectives began their meticulous grid search, starting from the exact point where 35-year-old Stacy Jones had collapsed in her final moments of life. She had been found lying on her side near the front entrance, having sustained 3 devastating gunshot wounds to her back. To any experienced investigator, the entry trajectory of the bullets told an immediate, chilling story of the final seconds of her life. She had been shot from behind, a physical confirmation that she was either retreating in urgent, terrified haste to escape an unfolding threat, or that she had completely turned her back on her attacker because her guard was entirely let down. There was no evidence of chaotic, face-to-face struggle in the open. The physical layout suggested an ambush executed by someone she knew well enough not to fear until it was far too late. Just feet away from the blood-stained concrete, crime scene technicians flagged 3 spent 9mm shell casings glinting under the harsh portable halogen lights. The placement of the brass casings provided a precise geographic anchor for where the shooter had stood when the fatal shots rang out, slicing through the midnight quiet just moments after the ShotSpotter acoustic sensors had beamed their automated alert to police dispatch. Yet, as investigators expanded their perimeter, their eyes were inevitably drawn to the most jarring visual element of the scene: the freshly sprayed white paint starkly contrasting against the clean siding of the house. The bold, crude letters spelling out KKK were plastered in multiple locations around the exterior, serving as an immediate, provocative neon signpost that demanded intense scrutiny. In the opening hours of any high-profile homicide investigation, every anomaly must be treated as a potential clue until proven otherwise. The presence of the Ku Klux Klan acronym instantly forced detectives to confront the terrifying hypothesis of a racially motivated hate crime. Could a pregnant mother living in a quiet South Side neighborhood have fallen victim to random, extremist domestic terrorism? Was there a roving band of white supremacists prowling the quiet residential blocks of Jeffrey Manor in the dead of night? As the hours ticked away and the preliminary neighborhood canvass deepened, veteran detectives grew increasingly skeptical of the hate crime theory, anchoring their doubt in the unique geographic and cultural reality of the neighborhood itself. Jeffrey Manor was a well-established, tight-knit, predominantly African-American and Hispanic community. It was a self-contained urban maze where every resident knew the rhythms of the street, the daily routines of their neighbors, and the unfamiliar silhouette of any outsider who dared to wander through uninvited. The idea of a group of white supremacists casually staging a late-night hate crime on a residential porch in the heart of Jeffrey Manor, without immediately triggering mass community, alarm defied basic logic. Furthermore, the application of the spray paint felt overly deliberate, excessively theatrical, and clumsily contrived, a desperate, cinematic gesture designed to shock the senses and point investigating authorities down a completely false ideological rabbit hole. It did not take a forensic genius to realize that whoever had applied those letters was attempting to construct an elaborate smokescreen, manufacturing a fictional narrative of racial animus to mask a much more intimate, deeply personal, and localized motive. The killer was trying to create confusion, hoping that the specter of racial hatred would obscure the glaring reality of a targeted, interpersonal execution. Yet, even as they dismissed graffiti as a cowardly diversion, the physical evidence at the scene continued to whisper vital truths about Stacy's frame of mind in her final days. The discovery of the 9mm semi-automatic pistol that had tumbled from the waistband of her pajama pants as paramedics loaded her onto the stretcher offered a profound window into her psychological state. Stacy was an experienced law enforcement professional, a trained Cook County probation officer who understood the inherent dangers of the world around her. The presence of a firearm tucked into her clothing strongly indicated that she had sensed a growing menace. She knew she was under threat. She anticipated a potential confrontation, and she kept the weapon close at hand as a desperate measure of self-preservation. Yet, tragically, that weapon remained holstered and unused. Stacy never drew a firearm to defend herself, reinforcing the detective's working theory that when the knock came at her door past midnight, she opened it not to a feared stranger or a hostile stalker, but to someone whose face she recognized, whose presence she trusted, and whose betrayal she could never have possibly anticipated in her worst nightmares. With the physical parameters of the crime scene mapped, photographed, and cataloged, detectives turned their attention outward, fanatically canvassing the surrounding neighborhood in search of digital footprints, closed-circuit security footage, and eyewitness accounts. In the modern metropolitan landscape, privacy is increasingly mediated by technology, and almost every residential block is silently monitored by an array of private security cameras, Ring doorbells, and dash cams. Moving door to door along the darkened streets of Jeffrey Manor, investigators knocked on polished wooden doors and interviewed sleepy, shaken residents who had been jarred awake by the terrifying symphony of gunfire and wailing police sirens. At one home directly across the street from Stacy's residence, a homeowner sleepily answered a series of urgent police inquiries. "We'd like to ask you some questions about the shooting that happened across the street last night," a detective stated, flashing his badge under the porch light. The homeowner rubbed his eyes, shaking his head. "Honestly, I didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. I was fast asleep until the cruisers pulled up with their lights flashing." "Well, we noticed you have a home security camera mounted by the garage." The detective pressed gently, leaning in. "Do you mind sharing that footage with us? Every second from tonight could be critical." "Yeah, no problem at all. Whatever helps," the neighbor replied, stepping aside to let officers access the recording system. When that digital footage was finally retrieved, decrypted, and brought back to the precinct for forensic enhancement, it transformed the trajectory of the entire investigation. What began as a murky, ambiguous puzzle suddenly clicked into sharp, undeniable focus. The grainy digital recording captured the crucial moments leading up to the tragedy, providing an objective, silent witness to the execution of Stacy Jones. The security video revealed a silver SUV slowly approaching Stacy's house in the dead of night, cruising past with an eerie, deliberate deliberation before pulling out a direct view to park nearby. A moment later, a male figure stepped into the edge of the camera's frame, walking up the driveway toward Stacy's front door. Although the lighting was dim and the man's face was partially obscured, one arresting visual detail leaped out immediately to the trained eyes of the investigators. The individual was wearing a heavy sweatshirt emblazoned with a very distinctive, highly identifiable graphic symbol. The man moved with an air of uncomfortable familiarity, pausing to shine a small flashlight directly through the windows of the home, checking for movement inside. After confirming the interior layout, he raised his hand and knocked firmly on the front door. The video footage then captured the poignant, tragic moment. Stacy peered out through the window, recognized the visitor standing on her porch, and made the fatal decision to unlatch the door. The two figures engaged in a brief, low-voiced conversation just outside the threshold. Stacy turned her back for a split second to re-enter the safety of her home, and in that precise, vulnerable fraction of a second, the violence erupted. The assailant drew a weapon, fired 3 rapid shots directly into her back, and then, before fleeing into the darkened alleys of the neighborhood, took the calculated time to grab the can of white spray paint and scrawl the mocking KKK insignia across the pristine siding of the house. The video made it unequivocally clear. Stacy never reached for her own firearm. There was no hesitation, no sudden burst of panic that caused her to grab the weapon tucked in her pajamas, because she felt entirely safe in the presence of the man standing before her. She did not perceive him as a lethal threat until the cold steel of betrayal tore through her flesh. As detectives studied the looping digital footage over and over again in the quiet hum of the precinct war room, the pieces of the puzzle began locking violently into place. The theatrical graffiti was exposed as a pathetic, transparent sham. The tactical weapon in Stacy's waistband stood as a tragic monument to a warning she received too late. And the silver SUV captured on camera became the vital golden thread that investigators would pull to unravel the meticulously constructed alibi of a man who thought he had successfully committed the perfect crime. The net was tightening around Corey Deering, pulling the investigation inexorably toward the dark, inescapable truth of who had hunted down a mother in the prime of her life. The pursuit of justice in a major urban homicide investigation is rarely a straight line of cinematic breakthroughs. Far more often, it is a grinding, exhausting war of attrition fought in the gray spaces between conflicting alibis, uncooperative witnesses, and tantalizing forensic dead ends. For the homicide detectives of the Chicago Police Department, the days following the murder of Stacy Jones and the heartbreaking loss of her newborn son devolved into a labyrinth of confounding suspects, porous alibis, and frustrating investigative walls that threatened to stall momentum just as the truth seemed within reach. Following the decryption of the neighbor's home security footage, which captured the silver SUV and the distinctive silhouette of the hooded figure wearing a branded sweatshirt, the immediate priority for the investigative team was establishing the identity of the vehicle's owner and dissecting the web of relationships surrounding the victim. The license plate captured on the digital recording became the central target of the inquiry. Detectives rushed the registration data back to the precinct terminal, holding their breath as the state database processed the query. When the registered owner's name finally flashed across the monitor, it delivered the first major shock of the phase. The vehicle was registered not to Corey Deering, the youth football coach and primary domestic focal point, but to an entirely unfamiliar woman named Alicia Wyatt. The introduction of Alicia Wyatt into the case file threw an unexpected, disorienting wrench into the investigators' working theories. Who was Alicia Wyatt? Given Stacy Jones's professional background as a Cook County probation officer, detectives immediately scrambled to check her official caseload files, looking for any active or discharged parolees, former offenders, or family members of convicts bearing the surname Wyatt. Every single file, digital record, and paper dossier was cross-referenced, yielding absolute silence. There was no record of an Alicia Wyatt anywhere in Stacy's professional orbit. She was neither a client, a parolee, nor a known acquaintance connected to the criminal justice system. Frustrated by the dead end within the probation department records, detectives fanned out across the city to interview Stacy's close colleagues and friends, hoping someone might recognize the name. When questioned at the Cook County office, Stacy's closest co-worker and confidant shook her head in genuine bewilderment. Alicia Wyatt? No, that name means nothing to me, the co-worker stated, her brow furrowed in concentration. Stacy was very open about her life, especially as things got complicated with the pregnancy, but I have never heard her mention anyone by that name. If there was another woman involved in Corey's life, Stacy certainly didn't know her name was Wyatt, at least not in connection to a vehicle parked outside her house. The realization that a second woman was tied directly to the logistics of the murder deepened the mystery, suggesting a much more intricate web of infidelity and concealment than detectives had initially imagined. Corey Deering had not merely maintained a secret affair with Stacy. His propensity for compartmentalized deceit clearly extended far beyond a single clandestine relationship. With the vehicle's owner temporarily shrouded in mystery, detectives turned their investigative focus back to the prime suspect himself, 39-year-old Corey Deering. To shatter his carefully constructed shield of civic innocence, the police needed to dismantle his alibi piece by meticulous piece. They needed to speak directly to the people who shared his roof and accounted for his midnight hours. A team of investigators drove out to Corey's suburban residence to interview his legal wife, a woman who was largely unaware of the full scope of her husband's explosive double life until the shadow of a homicide investigation landed on her doorstep. When detectives knocked and introduced themselves, the tension in the doorway was palpable. "Do you know a woman named Stacy Jones?" A detective asked directly, watching her facial microexpressions for any sign of practiced deception. Corey's wife blinked, her expression hardening instantly with a mixture of fatigue and defensive resentment. "Who? Stacy Jones? No, I don't know any Stacy Jones personally. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there was another woman. If she's pregnant with his child, she's certainly not the first to deal with this lifestyle." The statement hung heavily in the air. Corey's wife made no attempt to paint her husband as a saint. She was intimately familiar with his pattern of infidelity, acknowledging openly that he had fathered children with multiple women outside of their marriage. Yet, when detectives pressed her on whether she believed Corey was capable of extreme violence or murder, her defensive posture solidified into absolute disbelief. "Corey? No way," she insisted, shaking her head firmly. "He has other kids with other women. And he never tried to harm them or threaten them to prevent those children from being born. Why would Stacy Jones be any different? It doesn't make sense." When questioned about Corey's whereabouts on the night of the murder, his wife corroborated the alibi he had already provided to police during their initial casual contact at the Park District building. She stated definitively that on the night of October 12th into the early morning hours of October 13th, Corey had been right at home. According to her statement, he spent the evening working out in their home garage gym and tinkering with mechanical projects, a nightly routine he maintained religiously. She noted that their young son had spent a portion of the evening out in the garage with him before coming inside around 10:30 p.m. to get ready for bed. She claimed she had retired around that same time, leaving Corey out in the garage with the lights burning. Hoping to verify the physical layout of the alibi, detectives asked for permission to inspect the garage workspace. Corey's wife readily agreed, leading them through the interior connecting door. The garage presented a classic suburban workshop aesthetic. Heavy dumbbells, resistance bands, an organized workbench cluttered with tools and automotive supplies lining the shelves. But as detectives swept their eyes across the room, a chilling physical detail caught their immediate attention. Sitting prominently on a shelving unit were several cans of white spray paint. Given the crude, racially charged graffiti plastered across the exterior walls of Stacy Jones's Jeffrey Manor home, the discovery of white spray paint in Corey's personal workspace sent a sharp spike of adrenaline through the investigators. "Does this paint belong to Corey?" a detective inquired, pointing directly at the cans. Coming forward into the garage, Corey's wife offered a quick, casual explanation. "Actually, all that paint is mine. I use it for screen printing custom t-shirts and fabric crafts. Corey helps me out with equipment and supplies from time to time, but the screen printing gear is my domain." Was the paint match an incriminating smoking gun or merely an ironic, statistically insignificant coincidence in a city where millions of households stored standard hardware supplies? Without a direct forensic chemical analysis, linking the specific batch of paint from the garage shelves to the residue left on Stacy's siding, detectives could not arrest him on the cans alone. It was a frustrating angle, tantalizingly close, yet legally insufficient. Leaving the residence with caution, detectives returned to the precinct feeling the crushing weight of a potential angle threatening to stall out. They had a dead victim, a devastated family, a thoroughly discredited alibi supported only by an unsuspecting spouse, and a garage containing the same color spray paint used in a theatrical diversion. But they lacked the smoking gun that could conclusively place Corey at the scene during the exact minute of the shooting. That missing piece arrived when the forensic technical unit finally completed the extraction and analysis of Corey Deering's subpoenaed cell phone records. In modern criminal investigations, a suspect's digital footprint is often the most honest, unforgiving witness available. Detectives crowded around computer monitors in the squad room, looking not merely at the calls Corey had made, but at the stark, deafening gaps in his digital activity. The pattern of data traffic told an undeniable story of premeditation and cunning. During the critical hours of the evening, when Corey claimed to be actively working out and moving about his property, Specifically between 10:30 p.m. and 1 a.m., a window encompassing the exact timestamp of the ShotSpotter acoustic alert in Jeffrey Manor. His mobile phone exhibited a chilling, absolute void of activity. No text messages sent, no web browsing, no app usage, and crucially, no cell tower handshakes that would normally ping dynamically as a device traveled across the urban grid. For a man living in the modern digital age, a 2.5-hour blackout on a smartphone is never an accident. It is a deliberate, calculated maneuver. It strongly indicated that Corey had intentionally powered down his device, placed on airplane mode, or left it sitting stationary in his garage while he traveled to the far south side to execute his lethal mission, consciously attempting to evade the digital breadcrumbs that police tracking software relies upon. Yet, even the most meticulous criminals make fatal errors in their post-crime panic. The digital ledger revealed that the exact second the self-imposed blackout lifted at 1 a.m., just minutes after Stacey Jones had breathed her last breath on the pavement, Corey's phone abruptly sprang back to life, registering a single, isolated outbound phone call. The number dialed at that ungodly hour belonged to none other than Alicia Wyatt, the registered owner of the silver SUV, captured cruising past Stacey's home on the security camera. The walls of the angle had officially collapsed. The connection between the mysterious vehicle, the digital blackout, the alibi, and the motive snapped together with undeniable clarity. Detectives sat back in their chairs, a grim sense of satisfaction washing over the room. They no longer had to guess who Alicia Wyatt was or why her vehicle was tied to the neighborhood. The digital trail had handed them the master key to the entire conspiracy. With warrants signed and tactical units briefed, the Chicago Police Department prepared to bring Alicia Wyatt in for formal interrogation, knowing full well that her testimony would tear open the final, ugly secrets of Corey Deering's double life and provide the definitive breakthrough required to lock away a monster. The architecture of premeditated murder investigation often hinges upon a singular, brittle moment, a fracture in the suspect's carefully constructed wall of denial where logic, forensic science, and human testimony violently collide. For the homicide detectives of the Chicago Police Department, that pivotal turning point arrived not with a dramatic midnight raid or a confession born of sudden remorse, but in the sterile, high-tension atmosphere of an interrogation room where Alicia Wyatt finally sat face-to-face with the law. When tactical units brought Alicia into the precinct, the psychological weight of the unfolding disaster was already suffocating her. She was not a hardened career criminal or an underworld conspirator. She was a woman caught in the destructive orbit of Corey Deering, sharing not only a romantic entanglement with a married youth football coach, but the vulnerable, life-altering reality of being pregnant with his child. For days, she had carried the terrifying burden of knowing her silver SUV had been linked to a midnight crime scene, and that the man she trusted had used her vehicle, her phone patterns, and her blind loyalty as tools in a calculated execution. When the lead detective slid into metal chairs across from her, they didn't rely on intimidation. They laid out the timeline with cold, unyielding precision. They showed her the traffic camera stills, the cellular tower handshakes, the silent digital blackout window, and the precise timestamp of the single outgoing phone call placed to her device at 1 a.m., the exact second Corey's self-imposed digital exile ended. The illusion began to shatter. Confronted with the undeniable reality that she was being positioned to take the legal fall for a double homicide she did not commit, Alicia broke. The story she poured out to investigators blew the case wide open, confirming every dark suspicion the detectives had harbored. On the night of October 12th, Corey Deering had meticulously engineered his alibi at home, convincing his family he was merely working out in the garage. But under the cover of the digital blackout, he had contacted Alicia, instructing her to drive to his neighborhood under the guise of a routine late-night rendezvous. Once she arrived near his residence, Corey executed the first phase of his tactical evasion. He demanded her mobile phone, along with his own, and left both devices sitting stationary in the vicinity of his home. He understood the mechanics of cellular triangulation and digital tracking all too well. By ditching the phones, he believed he was creating an invisible ghost trail. Leaving the phones behind, Corey climbed into the passenger side or took the wheel of Alicia's silver SUV, directing her toward the far south side of Chicago and into the quiet residential labyrinth of Jeffrey Manor. Alicia recounted to detectives how Corey had instructed her to park down the street from Stacey Jones's residence, maintaining a dark, watchful vigil while he slipped away into the shadows on foot, carrying a loaded 9mm handgun and a can of white spray paint. She waited in the idling vehicle, enveloped in the tense silence of the midnight hour, until Corey suddenly reappeared, bursting back into the vehicle breathless, frantic, and trembling with adrenaline. He didn't explicitly shout out a confession in that initial wave of panic, but the suffocating dread inside the cabin told her everything she needed to know. They sped away into the night, returning to his neighborhood where he retrieved his stationary phone and instantly placed that single, fatal 1 a.m. check-in call to her line, a frantic confirmation that the deed was done. Armed with Alicia Wyatt's comprehensive, first-hand cooperation, the investigative stalemate dissolved instantly. The pieces of the puzzle locked together with mathematical cruelty. The silver SUV on the security footage, the digital blackout window, the spray paint cans discovered in Corey's garage workspace, and the chilling motive of an upstanding community pillar terrified of financial ruin, paternity exposure, and the collapse of his marriage formed an airtight wall of circumstantial and direct evidence. The breakthrough resonated far beyond the sterile walls of the precinct interrogation room. It represented a profound psychological victory for the detectives who had refused to let a cowardly, theatrical smokescreen derail the pursuit of truth. The crude KKK graffiti and racial slurs that had been crudely splashed across Stacey Jones's exterior walls, designed by a desperate killer to invoke systemic terror and send law enforcement chasing ghosts of racial hatred, were now exposed for what they truly were: the pathetic, clumsy autograph of a corner coward trying desperately to hide behind a manufactured hate crime. With Alicia's testimony corroborating the physical, digital, and forensic evidence, the Cook County State's Attorney's office formally approved multiple counts of first-degree murder against 39-year-old Corey Deering, encompassing the cold-blooded execution of Stacey Jones and the subsequent tragic death of her newborn son, whose fragile life had flickered out 4 days later due to the catastrophic oxygen deprivation suffered during the shooting. The arrest and subsequent charging of Corey Deering sent a shockwave for the Chicago Park District and the broader Jeffrey Manor community, where it spent over a decade projecting an immaculate veneer of civic virtue and selfless mentorship. Neighbors who had watched him coach children on sun-drenched gridirons struggled to reconcile the smiling, dependable handyman with the calculating predator who had walked up a residential driveway in the dead of night to gun down the mother of his unborn child in cold blood. Yet, beneath the polished exterior of community service lay the dark, rotting core of a man driven to ultimate violence by the fear of accountability. As the breakthrough solidified into formal charges and the case hurtled inexorably toward the courtroom, the mantle of justice shifted from the detectives in the field to the prosecutors preparing for trial. The journey had been arduous, marked by bloody concrete, false ideological leads, and digital labyrinths, but the truth had finally broken through the dark. The stage was set for a monumental legal reckoning where the massive community pillar would be ripped away forever, leaving only the stark, unvarnished reality of a monster facing the full, unyielding weight of the law. The culmination of a high-profile criminal investigation finds its ultimate theater within the solemn confines of courtroom, where the raw, jagged edges of human tragedy are meted out for the cold, methodical machinery of the law. For the family, friends, and colleagues of Stacey Jones, walking to the heavy oak doors of the Cook County Courthouse felt like stepping onto a battleground of memory and endurance. Months of painstaking legal preparations, pretrial motions, and evidentiary hearings had finally converged into this singular, monumental moment. The trial of 39-year-old Corey Deering, the former youth football coach and Chicago Park District employee whose public mask of civic virtue had been thoroughly stripped away to reveal a calculating, cold-blooded murderer. The courtroom was packed to capacity, humming with a tense, palpable energy. Media outlets from across the Midwest occupied the press benches, while on one side of the aisle, the prosecution team meticulously arranged their exhibits: digitized security footage, cell phone tower heat maps, forensic ballistics reports, and the silent, damning photographs of the silver SUV parked in the dark. Directly across the aisle sat Stacey's grieving family, their faces etched with profound, enduring sorrow, yet unified by an unshakable resolve to ensure that justice was fully and publicly served for Stacey and her newborn son. When Corey Deering was led into the courtroom by armed bailiffs, dressed in standard inmate attire and flanked by his defense counsel, the contrast between a man who had once commanded the sidelines of a children's football game and a defendant facing a double capital murder charge was staggering. He kept his eyes lowered, avoiding the searing, accusatory gaze of the gallery, maintaining a mask of stoic detachment that thinly veiled a quiet, cornered desperation. The prosecution opened its case with a powerful, narrative-driven presentation designed to systematically dismantle any remaining illusions of the defendant's innocence. Assistant state's attorneys did not rely merely on abstract legal theories. They reconstructed the harrowing events of October 13, 2020 with meticulous, devastating precision. They walked the jury step by step through the chronology of a carefully premeditated execution. Through expert testimony from crime scene technicians, the state demonstrated how the physical evidence, the 3.9mm shell casings, the bullet trajectories entering Stacy's back, and the tactical evasion of digital tracking via the self-imposed cell phone blackout, painted a picture of chilling calculation. The centerpiece of the state's case, however, rested upon the unassailable testimony of cooperating witnesses and forensic digital analysis. When Alicia Wyatt took the witness stand, the courtroom fell into an absolute, breathless hush. Speaking in a quiet, steady voice that carried the weight of profound betrayal, Alicia recounted the horrifying reality of the night she drove Corey to Jeffrey Manor. She detailed how he had confiscated her phone alongside his own, leaving them stationary near a suburban residence to spoof cellular triangulation data before slipping away into the night with a loaded weapon and a can of white spray paint. Her testimony bridged the gap between circumstantial suspicion and direct eyewitness accountability, effectively locking the door on any alternative narrative the defense attempted to construct. Furthermore, prosecutors dismantled the theatrical smokescreen of the racially charged KKK graffiti with clinical brilliance. They presented the cans of white spray paint recovered directly from Corey's home workshop shelves, matching the chemical composition and color residue to the hateful slurs splashed across Stacy's exterior walls. The jury was shown that the graffiti was never an act of random extremist violence, but rather a pathetic, calculated ploy designed by a desperate man to manipulate investigators, invoke systemic panic, and divert attention away from his own intimate betrayal. It was the autograph of a coward trying to frame an entire ideology for a crime born of personal greed, fear of financial ruin, and the terror of public exposure. The defense, for their part, faced an insurmountable wall of evidence. Their strategy relied heavily on trying to cast doubt on the digital timeline, attempting to frame Alicia Wyatt as an unreliable witness with her own motivations, and leaning on the initial character testimony of Corey's spotless prior record within the community park district. Defense attorneys cross-examined police investigators rigorously, pressing them on the absence of direct, recorded confession of the shooting itself and highlighting the lack of direct DNA evidence linking Corey's bare hands to the exterior siding where the paint was applied. Yet, these arguments felt increasingly hollow when weighed against the crushing mass of corroborating data. The silent phone window from 10:30 p.m. to 1 a.m., the immediate post-midnight phone call to Alicia's line, the silver SUV captured cruising past Stacy's home on the neighbor's security camera, and the overwhelming financial and interpersonal motives driven by multiple undisclosed paternity cases and impending child support obligations. The emotional zenith of the trial arrived during the victim impact statements delivered prior to sentencing, moments where the abstract legal parameters of first-degree murder transformed back into the human faces of unimaginable loss. Stacy's mother, trembling with a grief that time could never fully heal, stepped up to the microphone, her voice echoing off the high courtroom ceiling as she addressed the judge and the silent man seated across the room. She spoke of her daughter's boundless heart, her fierce dedication as a mother to her two young boys, and the excruciating pain of holding a dying newborn infant who survived for only 4 days because his mother's body had been brutally robbed of oxygen on a cold concrete porch. She articulated the agony shared by the entire family. The boys who were forced to grow up without a mother's embrace, the empty seat at holiday gatherings, and profound injustice of a life cut short in the radiant prime of its potential. When the jury finally returned from their deliberations, having reviewed days of agonizing testimony and voluminous digital exhibits, the verdict was delivered with unequivocal finality. On all counts, including the first-degree murder of Stacy Jones and the unlawful termination of her full-term unborn child, the jury found Corey Deering guilty. The courtroom absorbed the verdict with a heavy, collective sigh of release. The mask was gone, the facade of the beloved community pillar, the gentle giant of the Chicago Park District, have been permanently obliterated by the unyielding verdict of 12 impartial peers. At the formal sentencing hearing, the presiding judge did not hold back in condemning the sheer depravity of the crime, characterizing it as an execution born of cowardly self-preservation that violated every norm of human decency and social trust. The sentence handed down was absolute and uncompromising, multiple consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, ensuring that the man who believed he could outsmart the law, manipulate racial tensions, and murder his way out of a paternity crisis would spend the remainder of his natural existence locked away in the sterile, forgotten confines of a maximum security penitentiary. As Corey Deering was remanded back into the custody of armed guards, stripped his freedom, his relevance, and his human connection, fading slowly into the miserable obscurity of an inmate watching the world move forward through a narrow, barred slit, the legal battle drew to a definitive close. Justice had not restored what was lost. It could not bring back a dedicated probation officer, a loving mother, or an innocent baby boy who never drew a breath in the open world. But the verdict erected an unbreakable wall of accountability, proving that no matter how carefully a predator plots his crimes, and no matter what elaborate smokescreens he constructs to hide his sins, the unyielding light of truth and the collective resolve of a grieving family will always pierce the darkness. The echoes of a courtroom gavel and the finality of a maximum security prison sentence do not simply erase a tragedy. Rather, they mark the beginning of a long, agonizing, and courageous journey toward healing for those left behind in the wake of senseless violence. When the trial of Corey Deering concluded and the prison doors slammed shut behind a man whose cowardice had shattered an entire family, the blinding lights of the media circus slowly faded away, leaving the true victims confront the quiet, crushing reality of an existence forever altered. 4 11-year-old and 7-year-old boys who had slept soundly through the gunfire that claimed their mother's life on that chilling October midnight in 2020. The hardest chapter of their lives was only just beginning. Losing a mother at any age is a devastating fracture of one's world, but losing a mother to a violent, premeditated execution orchestrated by someone who pretended to care for the family introduces a complex, agonizing trauma that defies simple comprehension. In the immediate aftermath of the murder, as police tape fluttered and investigators unraveled the dark web of deception, extended family members rallied instantly around the 2 young boys. Aunties, uncles, and grandparents stepped forward to form an unbroken wall of love, stability, and emotional protection, ensuring that the children were never cast adrift into the cold bureaucracy of the foster care system. They were welcomed into homes filled with warmth, where their physical needs were met, their schooling was prioritized, and their tears were met with infinite patience and understanding. Yet, parenting grieving children requires a delicate balance of gentle reassurance and honest, age-appropriate truth as they grow older and begin to ask the inevitable questions. How does a caregiver explain to a 7-year-old why his mother never walked back to the front door? How does an 11-year-old process the horrific reality that the man who coached his football team smiled from the sidelines and shared casual jokes on autumn afternoons was a very monster who hunted his mother down in the dark? The extended family navigated these torturous conversations with remarkable grace, leaning on professional grief counselors and child psychologists who specialized in violent trauma recovery. They ensured the boys knew that their mother, Stacy Jones, was a woman of immense courage, a dedicated professional who wore a badge with honor, and a mother whose love for them was so vast and fierce that it defined every breath she took. As the years rolled forward toward the present day in 2026, the boys have grown, carrying their mother's resilient spirit within their hearts. They participate in sports, excel in school, and share laughter around holiday dinner tables, proving that while a monster can extinguish a life, he could never extinguish the radiant legacy of love that Stacy left behind. Every milestone they reach, every graduation, every touchdown scored on a football field, every birthday candle blown out, serves as both a quiet triumph of survival and a poignant reminder of the empty seat at the table. Their family makes certain that Stacy's memory is never locked away in the past. Her photographs adorn the walls, her favorite stories are retold with fond smiles, and her fierce, protective energy remains an invisible, guiding shield over her sons' lives. Beyond the immediate family circle, the ripples of Stacy Jones's murder left a permanent, transformative scar upon the broader community of Jeffrey Manor and the professional landscape of the Cook County criminal justice system. In the neighborhood, residents who had taken pride in their quiet, peaceful enclave on the far south side of Chicago were forced to confront the chilling reality that extreme danger can sometimes hide behind the most familiar, smiling faces. The case served as a stark reminder of the hidden domestic battles fought behind closed doors, prompting community organizations, local churches, and civic groups to redouble their efforts in supporting victims of domestic coercion, stalking, and gender-based violence. Neighborhood watch programs were revitalized, and greater emphasis was placed on recognizing the subtle, dangerous warning signs of psychological control before it escalates to physical destruction. Within the Cook County Probation Department, Stacy's colleagues never allowed her memory to dim. To those who worked alongside her day in and day out, navigating the heavy, heartbreaking caseloads of the criminal justice system, Stacy was much more than a co-worker. She was a brilliant legal mind, an empathetic counselor, and a steadfast friend who believed deeply in the redemptive power of the law. Every year, on the anniversary of her passing, her colleagues gathered privately to honor her dedication, sharing memories of her sharp intellect, her infectious laughter, and her unyielding commitment to justice. Some have established memorial scholarships and advocacy foundations in her name, directing resources toward supporting single mothers striving to complete their education in criminal forensics and legal studies. Mirroring the very academic path Stacy was walking before her life was cut tragically short. Furthermore, the legal and investigative facets of the Stacy Jones case left a lasting imprint on how law enforcement agencies across Illinois approach complex domestic homicides intertwined with theatrical diversions. The clumsy, racially charged KKK graffiti meticulously sprayed across the exterior walls of the Jeffrey Manor home became a prominent case study in modern police academies, a textbook example of a desperate killer attempting to construct an elaborate ideological smokescreen to manipulate public perception and divert investigators away from interpersonal motives. The meticulous, patient work of the Chicago Police Department homicide detectives and forensic digital analysts who systematically dismantled that false narrative, tracing the silent cell phone blackout window, cross-referencing the silver SUV, and securing cooperating eyewitness testimony, is now taught as a masterclass in modern investigative perseverance. It demonstrated that no matter how cleverly a predator attempts to hide behind historical prejudices or manufactured scapegoats, the cold, unyielding aggregation of digital data, forensic science, and human truth will ultimately drag the darkest secrets into the light. As time moves forward, the story of Stacy Jones transcends the grim true crime headlines that initially shocked the Midwest, evolving instead into a profound narrative of maternal sacrifice, resilience, and the triumph of human dignity over calculated malice. The nursery she painted with such tender pastel care in the autumn of 2020 may have ultimately stood empty, and the baby boy who was meant to fill it was cruelly denied his first breath in the open world. But their spirits remain bound eternally to the legacy of a remarkable woman. Stacy stood her ground against intimidation, refused to bow to cowardly coercion, and fought fiercely for the rights and dignity of her unborn child right up until her final heartbeat on a cold concrete porch. In the quiet, reflective spaces of the heart, where grief eventually softens into enduring remembrance, Stacy's story serves as an eternal beacon. It reminds every person who learns of her journey that true strength is not measured by the absence of fear, but by the courage to love fiercely, protect selflessly, and stand unwaveringly for justice even when the surrounding night grows pitch black. The monster who hunted her in the dark sits forgotten in a maximum security prison cell, stripped of his freedom, his relevance, and his humanity, watching the world pass by through a barred slit. But out in the sunlit world, Stacy's sons run, laugh, and grow into strong, compassionate men, carrying forward the brilliant, unquenchable light of a mother who gave everything she had to ensure they would always know they were fiercely, unconditionally loved. The final chapter of any profound human tragedy is written not in the cold language of judicial verdicts or the sterile records of maximum security prisons, but in the enduring legacy left in the hearts of those who continue to walk the earth carrying the torch of memory. For Stacy Jones, the journey from a vibrant, dedicated mother and public servant to an eternal symbol of unyielding courage is a testament to the fact that true love and moral integrity can never be permanently silenced by an act of cowardice. As the years stretch forward into the mid-2020s, the community that mourned her, the family that protected her memory, and a profession that honored her dedication continued to ensure that her life is defined not by the brutal manner of her passing, but by the magnificent, radiant light of how she lived. The physical landscape of Jeffrey Manor has largely returned to its quiet, tree-lined suburban rhythm, but the house on 95th Street remains a profound historical marker of resilience. The hateful graffiti that was once crudely sprayed across its siding, the desperate, theatrical smoke screen designed to mask a killer's guilt, was washed away long ago, replaced by fresh paint and the quiet dignity of domestic peace. New families have moved into the neighborhood over the years, and many may walk past a residence without knowing the full depth of sorrow that once pierced its threshold. Yet, for those who live through the nightmare and for the extended family members who visit regularly, the ground holds an almost sacred gravity. It is a place where a brave woman stood her ground against intimidation, refused to surrender her dignity, and protected her unborn child with her final breath. Within the warm, protective embrace of Stacy's extended family, her 2 surviving sons had continued to blossom into remarkable young men. The passage of time has transformed their raw, agonizing grief into a grounded, deeply rooted pride in who their mother was. Raised by aunts, uncles, and grandparents who poured an infinite reserve of love, patience, and stability into their lives, the boys have never lacked for guidance. They excel in their studies, channel their boundless energy into sports, just as they did on the sun-drenched football fields when their mother cheered loudest on the sidelines, and carry themselves with quiet strength that unmistakably mirrors Stacy's indomitable spirit. Every milestone they achieve, from academic awards to athletic victories, is quietly dedicated to her memory. Their family ensures that Stacy is never spoken of in hushed, melancholic whispers. Rather, her laughter, her favorite recipes, her passion for learning, and her fierce maternal protection are celebrated as active, guiding forces in their day-to-day existence. Beyond the family circle, the professional community within the Cook County justice system has institutionalized its remembrance of Stacy Jones in ways that ensure her legacy of public service will inspire generations of future law enforcement and forensic professionals. Each year, on the anniversary of her passing, colleagues from her probation department gather not merely to mourn, but to reaffirm their commitment to the ideals she lived by. Stacy was never viewed merely as an employee pushing paperwork. She was a beacon of radical empathy within a rigid institutional framework, a woman who genuinely believed in the capacity for human redemption while holding individuals strictly accountable for their choices. To honor that dual commitment, memorial funds and educational scholarships established in her name have provided vital financial assistance to single mothers striving to complete higher education in criminal justice, forensic science, and social advocacy. These scholarships serve as a living, breathing continuation of Stacy's unfulfilled academic dreams, enabling other women to rise above adversity and build secure, empowered futures for their own children. Furthermore, the legal precedent and investigative methodology forged during the hunt for a killer have left a permanent, transformative imprint on how modern police departments across the Midwest approach complex domestic homicides. The meticulous unraveling of the fake KKK diversion, the digital blackouts, the cell phone tower data analysis, the tracking of the silver SUV, and the exposure of a trusted community figure's dark double life is now studied as a foundational case study in criminal investigation training academies. It stands as an enduring lesson that no matter how cleverly a predator attempts to manipulate racial tensions, hide behind a veneer of civic virtue, or construct elaborate ideological smokescreens, the cold, unyielding aggregation of digital evidence and human truth will invariably drag the darkest secrets into the light. The detectives who poured their hearts into the case did more than secure conviction. They established a standard of investigative rigor that protects countless other vulnerable individuals who might otherwise be silenced by cowards. As we reflect upon the entirety of Stacy Jones's journey, we are reminded that the true measure of a human life is not found in the duration of its years, but in the depth of its impact, the fierce loyalty of its love, and the unwavering courage with which it confronts the darkness. Stacy was a daughter of Tennessee who brought Southern warmth to the bustling streets of Chicago. She was a dedicated probation officer who stared down despair with empathy and strength. She was a passionate scholar reaching for a doctorate in forensics. And above all, she was a magnificent, devoted mother who loved her boys with every fiber of her being. When faced with the ultimate test of coercion and fear, she did not flinch, she did not compromise, and she did not surrender her moral compass. The monster who hunted her in the midnight shadows now sits forgotten in the sterile, barred obscurity of a maximum security prison, stripped his freedom, his relevance, and his humanity, watching the world move forward through a narrow slit. He represents the absolute failure of human character, a cautionary tale of greed, cowardice, and self-destruction. But out in the sunlit world, Stacy's legacy burns with a brilliance that time cannot dim. Her sons run, laugh, and grow into compassionate, strong men, carrying forward the unquenchable light of a mother who gave everything she had to ensure they would always know they were fiercely, unconditionally loved. The nursery she painted with such tender pastel care in the autumn of 2020 may have stood empty, and the baby boy who was meant to share it was cruelly denied his first breath in the open world. But their spirits are bound eternally to an unbreakable chain of memory, justice, and enduring love. Stacy Jones remains an eternal beacon, a reminder that while darkness can occasionally ambush the innocent, it can never extinguish the radiant, triumphant power of a soul anchored in truth and love. The final epilogue of any profound human narrative often transcends the boundaries of the specific tragedy that birthed it, evolving into a timeless meditation on the resilience of the human spirit, the enduring power of memory, and the quiet triumph of love over calculated malice. For Stacy Jones, the journey from a vibrant, dedicated mother, public servant, and scholar to an eternal symbol of unyielding courage has cemented a legacy that time, distance, and darkness can never diminish. As the decade marches forward, the community that mourned her, the family that protected her memory, and the institutions that honored her dedication continue to ensure that her life is remembered not for the brutal manner of its ending, but for the magnificent, radiant light of how she lived every single day. The physical landscape of Jeffrey Manor in Chicago has continued its steady evolution, but the house on 95th Street remains a profound historical marker of courage and endurance. The hateful graffiti that was once crudely splashed across its exterior walls, the desperate, theatrical smoke screen designed to mask a killer's guilt and invoke systemic terror, was washed away years ago, replaced by fresh paint, well-tended landscaping, and a quiet dignity of domestic peace. While new families have moved into the neighborhood over the years, walking past the residence without necessarily knowing the full depth of the sorrow that once pierced its threshold, the ground itself holds an almost sacred gravity for those who remember. It stands as a silent monument to a brave woman who stood her ground against cowardice, refused to surrender her dignity, and protected her unborn child with her final heartbeat. Within the warm, protective embrace of Stacy's extended family, her two surviving sons have continued to blossom into remarkable young men, now well into their adolescent and teenage years. The passage of time has transformed their raw, agonizing childhood grief into a grounded, deeply rooted pride in who their mother was and what she stood for. Raised by aunts, uncles, and grandparents who poured an infinite reserve of love, patience, and stability into their lives, the boys have never lacked for guidance or affection. They excel in their studies, channel their boundless energy into sports, just as they did on the sun-drenched football fields when their mother cheered loudest on the sidelines, and carry themselves with quiet, inner strength that unmistakably mirrors Stacy's indomitable spirit. Every milestone they achieve, from academic awards to athletic victories, is quietly dedicated to her memory. Their family ensures that Stacy is never spoken of in hushed, melancholic whispers. Rather, her laughter, her favorite recipes, her passion for learning, and her fierce maternal protection are celebrated as active, guiding forces in their day-to-day existence. Beyond the immediate family circle, the professional community within the Cook County justice system has institutionalized its remembrance of Stacy Jones in ways that ensure her legacy of public service will inspire generations of future law enforcement and forensic professionals. Each year, on the anniversary of her passing, colleagues from her probation department gather not merely to mourn, but to reaffirm their commitment to the ideals she lived by. Stacy was never viewed merely as an employee pushing paperwork. She was a beacon of radical empathy within a rigid institutional framework, a woman who genuinely believed in the capacity for human redemption while holding individuals strictly accountable for their choices. To honor that dual commitment, memorial funds and educational scholarships established in her name have provided vital financial assistance to single mothers striving to complete higher education in criminal justice, forensic science, and social advocacy. These scholarships serve as a living, breathing continuation of Stacy's unfulfilled academic dreams, enabling other women to rise above adversity and build secure, empowered futures for their own children, ensuring that her passion for education lives on through others. Furthermore, the legal precedent and investigative methodology forged during the hunt for her killer have left a permanent, transformative imprint on how modern police departments across the Midwest approach complex domestic homicides. The meticulous unraveling of the fake KKK diversion, the digital blackouts, the cell phone tower data analysis, the tracking of the silver SUV, and the exposure of a trusted community figure's dark double life is now studied as a foundational case study in criminal investigation training academies. It stands as an enduring lesson that no matter how cleverly a predator attempts to manipulate racial tensions, hide behind a veneer of civic virtue, or construct elaborate ideological smokescreens, the cold, unyielding aggregation of digital evidence and human truth will invariably drag the darkest secrets into the light. The detectives who poured their hearts into the case did more than secure conviction. They established a standard of investigative rigor that protects countless other vulnerable individuals who might otherwise be silenced by cowards. As we reflect upon the entirety of Stacey Jones's journey across this sprawling chronicle, we are reminded that the true measure of human life is not found in the duration of its years, but in the depth of its impact, the fierce loyalty of its love, and the unwavering courage with which it confronts the darkness. Stacey was a daughter of Tennessee who brought Southern warmth to the bustling streets of Chicago. She was a dedicated probation officer who stared down despair with empathy and strength. She was a passionate scholar reaching for a doctorate in forensics. And above all, she was a magnificent, devoted mother who loved her boys with every fiber of her being. When faced with the ultimate test of coercion and fear, she did not flinch, she did not compromise, and she did not surrender her moral compass. The monster who hunted her in the midnight shadows now sits forgotten in the sterile, bar obscurity of a maximum security prison, stripped his freedom, his relevance, and his humanity, watching the world move forward through a narrow slit. He represents the absolute failure of human character, a cautionary tale of greed, cowardice, and self-destruction. But out in the sunlit world, Stacey's legacy burns with a brilliance that time cannot dim. Her sons run, laugh, and grow into compassionate, strong men, carrying forward the unquenchable light of mother who gave everything she had to ensure they would always know they were fiercely, unconditionally loved. The nursery she painted with such tender pastel care in the autumn of 2020 may have stood empty, and the baby boy who was meant to share it was cruelly denied his first breath in the open world. But their spirits are bound eternally to an unbreakable chain of memory, justice, and enduring love. Stacey Jones remains an eternal beacon, a reminder that while darkness can occasionally ambush the innocent, it can never extinguish the radiant, triumphant power of a soul anchored in truth and love. The final closing core of any profound narrative is never truly a conclusion, but rather a resonant transition into eternity, a timeless space where the echoes of a life fully lived continue to shape the world long after the final chapter has been written. For Stacey Jones, the expansive chronicle of her existence, her trials, her fierce maternal devotion, and her tragic sacrifice has woven itself into the permanent fabric of human remembrance. As time marches steadily forward into the late 2020s, the legacy she left behind stands as an immovable monument to the triumph of love and moral courage over the darkest machinations of human malice. In the quiet, tree-lined residential blocks of Jeffrey Manor, life moves with a familiar rhythm of changing seasons. Yet the ground on 95th Street retains an enduring significance for all who know its history. The physical reminders of that fateful October night have long since been washed away, replaced by the vibrant vitality of a home filled with light, blooming gardens, and the peaceful hum of neighborhood life. New residents who walk past the property may see only a charming suburban house, unaware of the profound drama that once played out across its threshold. But for the family members, friends, and community members who carry the memory of Stacey in their hearts, that threshold remains a sacred space, a testament to a brave woman who stood tall against intimidation, refused to surrender her dignity, and protected her unborn child with the absolute totality of her being. Within the loving, protective embrace of her extended family, Stacey's surviving sons continue to navigate their adolescent and teenage years with grace, resilience, and an inspiring strength of character. The passage of time has gradually smoothed the jagged edges of their childhood grief, transforming raw pain into a deeply rooted, unshakable pride in who their mother was. Supported by aunts, uncles, and grandparents who have surrounded them with an unbroken circle of stability, guidance, and unconditional affection, the boys have never lacked for a sense of belonging. They throw themselves into their education, channel their energy into athletics, honoring those sun-drenched Saturday mornings on the football field when their mother's voice rang out loudest from the sidelines, and carry themselves with a quiet, grounded maturity that unmistakably reflects Stacy's indomitable spirit. Every academic achievement, every athletic triumph, and every personal milestone is quietly dedicated to her enduring memory. Their family ensures that Stacy is never relegated to a distant, melancholic whisper. Rather, her infectious laughter, her culinary traditions, her passion for learning, and her fierce maternal protection are celebrated as active, living forces that guide their steps every single day. Beyond the immediate circle of family, the professional and institutional impact of Stacy's life continues to ripple outward through the Cook County criminal justice system and the broader community. Each year, as the anniversary of her passing arrives, her colleagues from the probation department gather not merely to revisit tragedy, but to recommit themselves to the values she championed. Stacy was never just an employee navigating bureaucratic red tape. She was a shining example of radical empathy and unwavering integrity, a professional who firmly believed in the possibility of human rehabilitation while demanding accountability. To ensure that her ideals outlive her, memorial scholarship funds established in her name continue to provide critical financial support to single mothers striving to complete higher education in criminal justice, forensic science, and social advocacy. These scholarships act as a living continuation of Stacy's own unfulfilled academic dreams, empowering other women to overcome adversity, shatter glass ceilings, and build secure, independent futures for their own children. Furthermore, the rigorous investigative methodology and legal precedents forged during the relentless hunt for her killer have permanently transformed how law enforcement agencies across the region approach complex domestic homicides. The meticulous dismantling of the theatrical KKK diversion, the uncovering of the digital blackout window, the analysis of cellular tower data, the tracking of the silver SUV, and the exposure of a trusted community figure's dark double life has become a foundational case study in police academies. It serves as an enduring lesson that no matter how cleverly a predator attempts to manufacture ideological smokescreens, exploit racial tensions, or hide behind a polished veneer of civic virtue, the unyielding pursuit of digital evidence and human truth will always drag hidden darkness into the light. The detectives who poured their intellect and heart into the investigation established an exemplary standard of professional rigor, ensuring that countless other vulnerable individuals are protected by the same unwavering commitment to justice. As we look back across the entirety of this vast, emotional chronicle, we are reminded of the true essence of human existence. A life is measured not by the arbitrary tally of its years, but by the depth of its compassion, the fierce loyalty of its commitments, and the extraordinary courage with which it confronts adversity. Stacy was a daughter of Tennessee who carried Southern grace into the bustling heart of Chicago. She was a dedicated public servant who brought empathy and strength to a broken system. She was an ambitious scholar reaching toward the pinnacle of forensic science. And above all, she was a magnificent, devoted mother who loved her boys with every fiber of her being. When placed at the ultimate crossroads of coercion and fear, she refused to flinch. She refused to compromise. And she never once surrendered her moral compass. The coward who hunted her in the midnight shadows now languishes in the sterile, barred obscurity of a maximum security prison cell, stripped of his freedom, his influence, and his humanity, watching the world drift past through a narrow slit. He stands as an absolute monument to human failure, a timeless cautionary tale of greed, deceit, and self-destruction. But out in the sunlit world, Stacy's legacy burns with brilliance that time can never dim. Her sons run, laugh, and grow into compassionate, strong men, carrying forward the unquenchable light of a mother who gave everything she had to ensure they would always know they were fiercely, unconditionally loved. The nursery she painted with such tender pastel care in the autumn of 2020 may have stood empty, and the baby boy who was meant to share was cruelly denied his first breath in the open world. But their spirits are bound eternally to an unbreakable chain of memory, justice, and enduring love. Stacy Jones remains an eternal beacon, an immutable reminder that while darkness can occasionally ambush the innocent, it can never extinguish the radiant, triumphant power of a soul anchored in truth, courage, and unconditional love. The final and ultimate epilogue of this vast, comprehensive chronicle transcends the boundaries of time, law, and tragedy, settling instead into the quiet, sacred domain of eternal legacy. When human history is written, it is often measured by the rise and fall of empires, the grand sweep of historical events, or the loud triumphs of the powerful. Yet, the true fabric of human existence is far more intimately defined by the quiet, everyday acts of courage, the fierce, uncompromising devotion of a mother's heart, and the unyielding refusal of the human soul to let darkness have the final word. For Stacey Jones, the expansive journey from a vibrant daughter of Tennessee to a dedicated Chicago public servant, an ambitious scholar, and protective mother has woven itself into an immutable tapestry of resilience and enduring grace. As the late 2020s unfold, the world she left behind continues to move forward, forever altered by her sacrifice, yet endlessly inspired by the brilliant, unquenchable light she radiated throughout her life. In the familiar tree-lined residential blocks of Jeffrey Manor, time maintains its gentle, rhythmic cadence, softening the sharp edges of the past while preserving the sacred gravity of memory. The house on 95th Street stands today not as a monument to sorrow, but as a silent testament to endurance. The crude, hateful graffiti that was once splashed across its exterior in a desperate, cowardly attempt to manufacture a false ideological diversion has long since vanished, replaced by clean siding, well-tended gardens, and the warm, tranquil hum of everyday life. New families walk these sidewalks, perhaps unaware of the harrowing drama that once pierced the midnight quiet of that autumn evening. But for those who carry Stacey's memory in their souls, her grieving family, her loyal friends, and the community members who bore witness to her strength, that threshold remains hallowed ground. It is the place where a courageous woman stood tall against intimidation, rejected the demands of a fearful predator, and protected the dignity of her unborn child with the absolute totality of her being. Within the loving, protective embrace of her extended family, Stacey's surviving sons have continued to flourish into remarkable, grounded young men. The tumultuous, agonizing waves of their childhood grief have gradually settled into a deep, unshakable foundation of pride in who the mother was and what she stood for. Raised by aunts, uncles, and grandparents who surrounded them with an unbroken circle of stability, patience, and unconditional affection, the boys have never lacked for a sense of profound belonging. They pour their energy into their education, excel in their classrooms, and throw themselves into athletics, honoring those sun-drenched Saturday mornings on the football field where their mother's voice rang out loudest from the sidelines. They carry themselves with a quiet, mature dignity that unmistakably reflects Stacey's indomitable spirit. Every academic achievement, every athletic victory, and every personal milestone is quietly dedicated to her enduring memory. Their family ensures that Stacey is never relegated to a distant melancholic whisper. Rather, her infectious laughter, her cherished culinary traditions, her passion for learning, and her fierce maternal protection are celebrated as active, living forces that guide their steps every single day of their lives. Beyond the immediate circle of family, the professional and institutional impact of Stacey's life continues to ripple outward to the Cook County criminal justice system and the broader community. Each year, as the anniversary of her passing arrives, her colleagues from the probation department gather not merely to revisit a tragedy, but to recommit themselves to the values she championed throughout her career. Stacey was never just an employee pushing paperwork through a rigid bureaucratic machine. She was a shining example of radical empathy and unwavering integrity, a professional who firmly believed in the possibility of human rehabilitation while demanding personal accountability. To ensure that her ideals outlive her, memorial scholarship funds established in her name continue to provide critical financial support to single mothers striving to complete higher education in criminal justice, forensic science, and social advocacy. These scholarships act as a living continuation of Stacey's own unfulfilled academic dreams, empowering other women to overcome adversity, shatter glass ceilings, and build secure, independent futures for their own children. Through these women, Stacey's passion for justice and education continues to change lives, proving that a dedicated life cannot be extinguished by an act of malice. Furthermore, the rigorous investigative methodology and legal precedents forged during the relentless hunt for a killer have permanently transformed how law enforcement agencies across the region approach complex domestic homicides. The meticulous dismantling of the theatrical KKK diversion, The uncovering of the digital blackout window, the analysis of cellular tower data, the tracking of the silver SUV, and the exposure of a trusted community figure's dark double life has become a foundational case study in police training academies. It serves as an enduring lesson that no matter how cleverly a predator attempts to manufacture ideological smokescreens, exploit racial tensions, or hide behind a polished veneer of civic virtue, the unyielding pursuit of digital evidence and human truth will always drag hidden darkness into the light. The detectives who poured their intellect and heart into the investigation established an exemplary standard of professional rigor, ensuring that countless other vulnerable individuals are protected by the same unwavering commitment to justice. As we look back across the entirety of this vast, emotional chronicle, we are reminded of the true essence of human existence. A life is measured not by the arbitrary tally of its years, but by the depth of its compassion, the fierce loyalty of its commitments, and the extraordinary courage with which it confronts adversity. Stacy was a daughter of Tennessee who carried Southern grace into the bustling heart of Chicago. She was a dedicated public servant who brought empathy and strength to a broken system. She was an ambitious scholar reaching toward the pinnacle of forensic science. And above all, she was a magnificent, devoted mother who loved her boys with every fiber of her being. When placed at the ultimate crossroads of coercion and fear, she refused to flinch. She refused to compromise. And she never once surrendered her moral compass. The coward who hunted her in the midnight shadows now languishes in the sterile, barred obscurity of a maximum security prison cell, stripped of his freedom, his influence, and his humanity, watching the world drift past through a narrow slit. He stands as an absolute monument to human failure, a timeless cautionary tale of greed, deceit, and self-destruction. But out in the sunlit world, Stacy's legacy burns with a brilliance that time can never dim. Her sons run, laugh, and grow into compassionate, strong men, carrying forward the unquenchable light of a mother who gave everything she had to ensure they would always know they were fiercely, unconditionally loved. The nursery she painted with such tender pastel care in the autumn of 2020 may have stood empty, and the baby boy who was meant to share it was cruelly denied his first breath in the open world. But their spirits are bound eternally to an unbreakable chain of memory, justice, and enduring love. Stacy Jones remains an eternal beacon, an immutable reminder that while darkness can occasionally ambush the innocent, it can never extinguish the radiant, triumphant power of a soul anchored in truth, courage, and unconditional love. The final resolution of this expansive chronicle brings us to the ultimate horizon of remembrance, where the raw, jagged edges of tragedy soften into an enduring testament of human grace, resilience, and unyielding love. When the final chapters of history are written, they are defined not merely by the sorrows we endure, but by the magnificent, radiant light we choose to carry forward into the darkness. For Stacy Jones, the journey from a devoted daughter of Tennessee to a cherished Chicago public servant, an ambitious scholar, and a fiercely protective mother has culminated in a legacy that transcends time, distance, and the chilling malice of a cowardly act. As the late 2020s continue to unfold, the world she left behind moves forward forever altered by her sacrifice, yet bound eternally to the inspiration of her remarkable spirit. In the familiar, tree-lined residential blocks of Jeffrey Manor, time maintains its gentle, rhythmic cadence, wrapping the neighborhood in the comforting familiarity of changing seasons while preserving the sacred gravity of memory. The house on 95th Street stands today not as a monument to sorrow, but as a silent testament to endurance. The crude, hateful graffiti that was once splashed across its exterior in a desperate, cowardly attempt to manufacture a false ideological diversion has long since vanished, replaced by clean siding, well-tended gardens, and the warm, tranquil hum of everyday life. New families walk these sidewalks, perhaps unaware of the harrowing drama that once pierced the midnight quiet of that autumn evening. But for those who carry Stacy's memory in their souls, her grieving family, her loyal friends, and the community members who bore witness to her strength, that threshold remains hallowed ground. It is the place where a courageous woman stood tall against intimidation, rejected the demands of a fearful predator, and protected the dignity of her unborn child with the absolute totality of her being. Within the loving, protective embrace of her extended family, Stacy's surviving sons had continued to flourish into remarkable, grounded young men. The tumultuous, agonizing waves of their childhood grief have gradually settled into a deep, unshakable foundation of pride in who their mother was and what she stood for. Raised by aunts, uncles, and grandparents who surrounded them with an unbroken circle of stability, patience, and unconditional affection, the boys have never lacked for a sense of profound belonging. They pour their energy into their education, excel in their classrooms, and throw themselves into athletics, honoring those sun-drenched Saturday mornings on the football field where their mother's voice rang out loudest from the sidelines. They carry themselves with a quiet, mature dignity that unmistakably reflects Stacy's indomitable spirit. Every academic achievement, every athletic victory, and every personal milestone is quietly dedicated to her enduring memory. Their family ensures that Stacy is never relegated to a distant melancholic whisper. Rather, her infectious laughter, her cherished culinary traditions, her passion for learning, and her fierce maternal protection are celebrated as active, living forces that guide their steps every single day of their lives. Beyond the immediate circle of family, the professional and institutional impact of Stacy's life continues to ripple outward through the Cook County criminal justice system and the broader community. Each year, as the anniversary of her passing arrives, her colleagues from the probation department gather not merely to revisit a tragedy, but to recommit themselves to the values she championed throughout her career. Stacy was never just an employee pushing paperwork through a rigid bureaucratic machine. She was a shining example of radical empathy and unwavering integrity, a professional who firmly believed in the possibility of human rehabilitation while demanding personal accountability. To ensure that her ideals outlive her, memorial scholarship funds established in her name continue to provide critical financial support to single mothers striving to complete higher education in criminal justice, forensic science, and social advocacy. These scholarships act as a living continuation of Stacy's own unfulfilled academic dreams, empowering other women to overcome adversity, shatter glass ceilings, and build secure, independent futures for their own children. Through these women, Stacy's passion for justice and education continues to change lives, proving that a dedicated life cannot be extinguished by an act of malice. Furthermore, the rigorous investigative methodology and legal precedents forged during the relentless hunt for her killer have permanently transformed how law enforcement agencies across the region approach complex domestic homicides. The meticulous dismantling of the theatrical KKK diversion, the uncovering of the digital blackout window, the analysis of cellular tower data, the tracking of the silver SUV, and the exposure of a trusted community figure's dark double life has become a foundational case study in police training academies. It serves as an enduring lesson that no matter how cleverly a predator attempts to manufacture ideological smokescreens, exploit racial tensions, or hide behind a polished veneer of civic virtue, the unyielding pursuit of digital evidence and human truth will always drag hidden darkness into the light. The detectives who poured their intellect and heart into the investigation established an exemplary standard of professional rigor, ensuring that countless other vulnerable individuals are protected by the same unwavering commitment to justice. As we look back across the entirety of this vast, emotional chronicle, we are reminded of the true essence of human existence. A life is measured not by the arbitrary tally of its years, but by the depth of its compassion, the fierce loyalty of its commitments, and the extraordinary courage with which it confronts adversity. Stacy was a daughter of Tennessee who carried Southern grace into the bustling heart of Chicago. She was a dedicated public servant who brought empathy and strength to a broken system. She was an ambitious scholar reaching toward the pinnacle of forensic science. And above all, she was a magnificent, devoted mother who loved her boys with every fiber of her being. When placed at the ultimate crossroads of coercion and fear, she refused to flinch. She refused to compromise. And she never once surrendered her moral compass. The coward who hunted her in the midnight shadows now languishes in the sterile, barred obscurity of a maximum security prison cell. Stripped of his freedom, his influence, and his humanity, watching the world drift past through a narrow slit. He stands as an absolute monument to human failure, a timeless cautionary tale of greed, deceit, and self-destruction. But out in the sunlit world, Stacy's legacy burns with brilliance that time can never dim. Her sons run, laugh, and grow into compassionate, strong men, carrying forward the unquenchable light of a mother who gave everything she had to ensure they would always know they were fiercely, unconditionally loved. The nursery she painted with such tender pastel care in the autumn of 2020 may have stood empty, and the baby boy who was meant to share was cruelly denied his first breath in the open world. But their spirits are bound eternally to an unbreakable chain of memory, justice, and enduring love, Stacy Jones remains an eternal beacon, an immutable reminder that while darkness can occasionally ambush the innocent, it can never extinguish the radiant, triumphant power of a soul anchored in truth, courage, and unconditional love. The final absolute threshold of this expansive chronicle brings us to the ultimate, unbroken horizon of remembrance, a space where time itself becomes a testament to the enduring power of human grace, resilience, and unyielding love. When the final volumes of human history are written, they are defined not merely by the trials we endure or the sorrows we are forced to carry, but by the magnificent, radiant light we choose to project forward into the darkest corners of the world. For Stacy Jones, the journey from a devoted daughter of Tennessee to a cherished Chicago public servant, an ambitious scholar, and a fiercely protective mother has culminated in a legacy that transcends distance, decades, and the chilling malice of a cowardly act. As the late 2020s continue to unfold, the world she left behind moves forward forever altered by her sacrifice, yet bound eternally to the inspiration of her remarkable spirit. In the familiar, tree-lined residential blocks of Jeffrey Manor, time maintains its gentle, rhythmic cadence, wrapping the neighborhood in the comforting familiarity of changing seasons while preserving the sacred gravity of memory. The house on 95th Street stands today not as a monument to sorrow,